Steve is going to be here, isn't he?
Lots of stuff is what they put online. Lots of stuff. Sent it, got the best with David DeBellis, which is got publishing, family, and he put in like lots of stuff in like investments. And that's what he submitted his financial statement. And it's like that from year after year after year until he left the board.
Oh my God, well, that's like my dad when he used to ask for income, when he would apply for stuff, he would say enough.
Right. Right.
As much as I do.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, but I will look, like a lot of times when I get the new cops on zoning, like the Bible, I don't throw the old ones out, so I might have one that's a few years old, but that might be helpful until you can go get the training. Just can kind of like, it's definitely not like reading, but you can pick a chapter that talks about bulk variances or use variances and run through a little bit. So I'll remember if I have any old ones at home.
Or let me know.
No, I'll just bring it the next meeting. That's no big deal.
Yeah. By the time you go to class, they're gonna have snow. So the bell. That's
He don't even look like this, Steve. Are we ready?
I get that all the time.
In accordance with Section 5 of the Open Public Meetings Act, Chapter 231, Public Law 1975, be advised that a notice of this meeting was made by posting on the bulletin board, town hall, and mailing to the officially designated newspapers a list of the meeting dates annually, indicating that this meeting would take place at the town hall at 7 p.m. on Monday, May 6, 2019. Roll call.
Meredith Nett.
Here.
Craig Claiborne.
Here.
Steve Toker.
Here.
Wolfgang Torres.
Here.
Kevin Wenzel.
Here.
Chairman Jones.
Here. I have a few announcements before we begin tonight. First, for the members of the board who are here, the annual report for 2018 has been forwarded to the planning board, and it will be discussed by the planning board at its meeting on May 15th, 2019 at 7:30 p.m. in this room. So any member of the zoning board who would like to be there that night to answer any questions about the annual report or discuss it with the planning board, feel free. It is
They should not
also,
all go.
pardon me?
They should not all go.
No.
Can't have more than,
We should have not more than
not more
four.
than, you know,
Not more than
not more
four.
than.
And tonight is that calendar 3681-19, which is a property located at 353 Wyoming Avenue, will not be heard tonight. That case will be heard on June the 3rd.
Well, you can't announce.
No, because it's deficiency in the notice.
The notice,
The notice was defective, that's why they're not being heard.
I know, but it
We're
have,
not gonna announce a date.
No, because,
We can't open it.
right,
oh, that's right, we can't even open the case.
so they're gonna renotice.
They have renoticed. Okay, so that matter, which is number 2 on your agenda, is not being heard this evening. The third announcement is that the last case listed for tonight, Feldman, at 153 Highland Avenue, is going to be moved up and will be heard second tonight after 38 Sinclair Terrace. Okay, those are the announcements, and we're going to turn now to the approval of the minutes of April 15th, 2019. I want to remind board members I'm going to call for a motion to approve those minutes. If you were not here that night, do not make the motion, do not second it, and do not vote on the minutes. Is there a motion to approve the minutes as circulated by our secretary? I guess it was yesterday, right?
And I sent the revised minutes today.
The revised minutes went out today. Mary, are you satisfied with the minutes?
Yes.
Okay.
I move approval.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The minutes of April 15th, 2019 are adopted. We have 4 memorializations tonight. In each case, I will ask our secretary to inform us who is eligible to vote on those memorializations. The first one is calendar 3667-17, 306 White Oak Ridge Road, or White Oak Ridge LLC. The property is at 306 White Oak Ridge Road in Short Hills.
Mr. Chairman, just to let you know, Mr. Tsouras picked up one more correction on page 5. Predates should have been predate. I corrected that and sent Eileen the final corrected version.
Okay, and do you know what line that's on?
No,
I don't remember.
let me see what his, I think he just said, minor typo on page 5.
Oh, no,
Page 5?
Yeah.
Okay. I just want to put it in the record. Okay.
Sometimes his is, I can't seem to open it in my, yes, paragraph 11,
Paragraph 11.
yes,
Oh,
predates, should be predate.
Predated, it should be?
No, it should be predate, singular, those
Oh,
properties
predate,
predate.
okay.
Thank you.
So just for the record, on the copy that was distributed to the board members, the correction is on line 115, paragraph 11, line 5, predate instead of predates. Delete the S. Any other corrections on that
That's it.
memorialization? Who's eligible on White Oak Ridge Road?
Mary McNabb, Steve Toger, Joseph Steinberg, Wolfgang Peters.
Will one of the three of you like to make a motion to adopt the memorializing resolution in calendar 3667-19?
I move approval of 3667-19.
second?
Mary McNabb,
Yes.
Steve Toger,
Yes.
Wolfgang Peters.
Yes.
Joseph Steinberg.
Yes. The next memorialization is calendar 3680-19, Mizuno Meneguzzo, 368 Old Short Hills Road, Short Hills. Who's eligible here?
The same four.
The same 4 people? Are there any additions or corrections to that memorializing resolution? If not, will one of the three of you like to make a motion to adopt the memorializing resolution in calendar 3672-19?
I move adoption of calendar 3680-19.
Is there a second?
Second.
No. Did you second it?
I thought you said the same four.
I'm sorry. Okay, yeah, that was my mistake.
Okay, no problem.
Yeah, you and I have to be.
Sorry.
Okay.
So,
I second.
Wolfgang?
Wolfgang, second.
Mary McKenna? Yes. Craig Whitner?
Yes.
Wolfgang Torres?
Yes.
Joseph Steinberg?
Yes. The third one is calendar 3682-19, Yair Ben-Dori, 68 Myrtle Avenue, Millburn. Who's eligible here?
Eligible is Mary McKenna, Craig Whitner, Joseph Steinberg, Wolfgang Torres.
Any additions or corrections? Will one of the three of you like to make a motion on this calendar 3682-19?
Motion to adopt calendar 3682-19.
Second. Mary McKenna? Yes. Craig Whitner?
Yes.
Wolfgang Torres?
Yes.
Joseph Steinberg?
Yes. And finally, calendar 3684-19, All Pro Health at 20 Main Street in Millburn. Wait, who's eligible here?
Mary McKenna, Craig Whitner, Wolfgang Torres, Joseph Steinberg.
Any additions or corrections on 84-19? Will one of the three of you like to make a motion on this one?
I move approval of calendar 3684-19.
Second.
Mary McKenna? Yes. Craig Whitner?
Yes.
Wolfgang Torres,
Yes.
Joseph Steinberg?
Yes. Okay, we are now ready to launch into our actual agenda tonight. The first case we will hear, and let the record show that the vice chair of the board has recused on this case. So we are set to proceed. I do want to make a comment, and that is that, as you can see, we have only 6 members here tonight. And even though there are no D variances, you need 4 votes out of 6, which is harder to get than 4 votes out of 7. But we have 2 absences and the recusal, so we're down to what you see.
We understand that, Mr. Chairman, and let me just introduce myself. Rob Simon from Herald Law, here on behalf of the applicants Stephanie and Howard Vogel, 38 Sinclair Terrace in Short Hills. I did speak to my clients about that situation, and at this point, we do wish to proceed.
Great.
So, as this regards Block 4206, Lot 17, and we are here for a number of bulk variances. Before I get started, Mr. Chairman, I've had some communications. I have with me here Ron Gazarovski, who's the attorney representing Gordon and Judy Freund, 48 Sinclair Terrace, which is the next door neighbor. And Mr. Gazarovski and I have had a number of conversations pertaining to this application. I just wanted to basically introduce him at this point because I thought it would be appropriate to do so. He may have a couple of words regarding the
Thank you.
application.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, if you remember, I was here probably a month and a half or so ago when this matter first began. That particular time, I represented Mr. and Mrs. Freud, who were adjacent neighbors. At that time, the hearing was adjourned. I've spoken to Mr. Simon, who has since been retained. I want to state for the record that the Vogels have been extremely courteous to my clients, met with them several times in an effort to resolve this matter. I've also spoken to Mr. Simon several times. My client no longer has any objection to this application, so I'll be withdrawing any previous comments I made. The only condition that we would insist upon, and I don't think it's a problem, is that the architectural drawings which were submitted as a part of this application, if in fact this board grants this application, they be incorporated into that resolution. Secondly, while we are objecting, we are not in any way making any comment with regard to the application itself. So my adversary colleague will present his case, and whatever this board decides, that of course is your decision. But my client withdraws any objection that he has to the application.
Mr. Gazarovski, just so you're aware, this board routinely incorporates the architectural plans into the approval as a condition of approval by reference to the plans and the date or revision date of the plans themselves.
That's fine. I would just like to comment that this has only come about as a result of the manner in which the vocals have proceeded. If in fact this board does in fact grant them approval, we wish them health and happiness in their new home.
Thank you.
Okay?
Thank you.
Mr. Gazarovski.
Mr. Simon, I don't believe you were here last time, but, we were here twice on this case, and we did not proceed on either occasion. So there's been no witnesses sworn. Everybody who's presently sitting on the dais is eligible to vote.
Very good. Thank you, Ms. Frazier. Appreciate that. So we have five variances this evening: combined side yard setback, second-story setback, side yard garage setback, front yard setback, and building coverage. The extent of the deviations are set forth in the application as well as in the revised plans that were most recently submitted by Casey and Keller. As this board is aware, this is an undersized lot, which, as you will hear through some of the testimony presented, is the main reason why various relief is required with regard to this particular application. We have two witnesses this evening wearing three hats. So we have Rich Keller, who you're very familiar with from Casey and Keller, who's going to provide engineering testimony as our professional engineer, and he also will eventually provide planning testimony as our professional planner on the project. We also have with us Joe Sestaro from Appel Design Group, who is the architect on the project. So,
But I have a couple of comments before you begin.
sure, Mr.
First of all, board members, a question was raised by a member as to whether or not the concept of self-imposed hardship was operative here. I inquired of our attorney as to that issue, and she's here and she can speak for herself, but what I remember from the conversation with her is that she did not know of a case that specifically addressed the issue, exact issue that we have before us this evening, and suggested that we hear the case and deal with it as in our regular fashion, and not invoke the concept of self-imposed hardship. Is that
That's correct.
an accurate statement? And counsel, I have another question for you before you begin. We had submitted a second set of plans, which I'm looking at. The first set, I'm looking at the Appel Design Group architectural plans. The first set that we had was dated 12/10/18. A second set indicates a reissue for the zoning board of 4/23/19. Can the first set be disposed of?
I believe so.
Okay.
And just so the board is aware, and we'll get into this through testimony, but one of the things that the applicant did in working with the neighbor and working with our design team is that we were able to eliminate one of the variances we originally asked for.
Well,
We'll
I
get into
have
that.
I have the summary of variances that was submitted with the original application, and I would appreciate it if you, with reference to that document, could indicate which variance is no longer.
Sure. Mr. Steinberg, if you would, I'm going to have Mr. Keller do that as he
That's
goes
fine.
through the plan.
That's fine.
Okay. So unless any of the members of the board, professionals have any questions, I'd like to start by having Mr. Keller be sworn.
Yes, I do. Richard Keller, Keller.
In what capacity are you presenting, Mr.?
So I'm going to be presenting in qualifying Mr. Keller both as a professional engineer as well as a professional planner. But I will actually have, when Rich completes his engineering testimony, have him sit down and have the architect go second, and then bring Rich back to back cleanup with regard to planning.
Let's qualify him in both capacities now.
Yeah, so I know you're very familiar with Mr. Keller, but Mr. Keller, can you just briefly provide your occupation, affiliation, areas of expertise in the fields of engineering and planning?
Yes, I'm a licensed professional engineer and planner in the state of New Jersey with the firm of Casey and Keller, with whom I'm a partner. I've been licensed as an engineer since 1989 and as a planner since 1990. I hold a Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering with a concentration in water resources and environmental engineering, and that is from Rutgers University. I also hold a Master's in Architecture with a concentration in urban planning and design, and that is from the New Jersey Institute of Technology, where I was also an adjunct professor for approximately 10 years in both the undergraduate and graduate divisions. I've appeared before this board, the planning board, as well as approximately 105 to 110 boards throughout the state of New Jersey as both planner and engineer. And I've also provided consulting, engineering, and planning services to a number of boards in the state as well. My licenses are in good effect.
For both engineering.
For both engineering and planning.
And we asked that Mr. Keller be qualified as both a professional engineer and professional planner with regard to this application.
His qualifications are accepted in both capacities.
Thank you, Mr. Steinberg. Mr. Keller, you're familiar with the project and you've prepared the engineering plans with regard to this application, correct?
Yes, we prepared a plot plan for the application. We've not done a grading and drainage plan, but we have prepared a plot plan and the zoning analysis.
If you would just start out maybe by giving an overview of the plan, including the variance relief that we're here for this evening.
I have some exhibits that I'll be referring to, so perhaps I should bundle them for these board, and then I'll have them as.
So, Mr. Keller, why don't we mark those. So the first thing you're showing is the zoning and tax map. Mr. Keller? I'll go ahead and want that.
Rich, did you give one to Eileen?
Yes.
Oh, you got one, okay.
There are 3 sheets in this packet that I've handed out. The first is the tax and zoning map.
Hold on, so why don't we mark it as A1?
A1 will be the tax map.
Yes, it's entitled Tax and Zoning. And Mr. Keller, what else did you hand out for the board so we can get it marked?
Photo board number 1 would be A2, and that is there are a total of 8 photographs taken by both myself and the owner of the property, ranging in dates from January 9th through today's date.
And then A3 is a satellite photo. Mr. Keller?
A3 is a satellite photo. It is taken from nearmap.com. The image date was April 22nd, 2018. We superimposed the township tax maps on top of that. It is rectified to a scale of 1 = 40, so it is scalable. And that shows both the surrounding homes as well as both the existing dwelling and the proposed dwelling superimposed on top of it.
So that's A3.
A3, correct. So starting with A1, the property is approximately, it's on Sinclair Terrace, it's approximately 400 feet to the east of the intersection of Sinclair with Fairfield Drive. The property is wholly located within the R3 residential zone, and it is located immediately contiguous to the South Mountain Reservation, which is a 2,100 acre parcel immediately to our right. The right boundary is the reservation. There are no dwellings to the right side of it. The property is 24,343 square feet. It's in a zone, the R3 zone, where 29,000 is required. So this lot is approximately 16% smaller than that required by the zone. I'll get into some of the more peculiarities, but the tax map and zoning is intended to show The relative size of the lots that are in the red shaded area are the additional lots in the R3 zone. You can see there are 2 lots that are significantly undersized as compared to the rest of the lots in the local R3 zone. These 2 lots are really more consistent with the size of the lots that are in the R4 zone. The 2 lots across the street, which are larger, and there are some larger lots on our side of Sinclair, but the last 2 lots on the north side of Sinclair are less than 24,000 feet in size, or less than 25,000 square feet in size, and they're much more analogous, you can see just by looking at the image, of the lots that sit in the R4 zone.
And Mr. Keller, with regard to the owner of the lot that Mr. Gazarovski represented, that was one of those 2 lots that you're referencing,
That's one of
correct?
the 2 lots that is also undersized. That's the lot immediately to our left. And I'll get into the size of that in a second. If I go to the A2, which is the photo board, there are, looks like somehow we brought the wrong photo board. So I'm going to refer to what you have before you. And I'll hold this one up. That was the old photo board.
So you're gonna, why don't you?
Well, we're looking at ours, so you don't have
Yeah,
to.
right, but I'm saying just mark that as A2.
Yep. So A2 in the upper left-hand corner is a view of 48 Sinclair Terrace looking northeast from the street. That is the client, Mr. Gajarowski's client, the property immediately to the left of us. That is a 2-story structure. A lot of the second story is behind the gable. It's actually represents about 14% lot coverage, the same as we're proposing on our property. The photograph number 2 is a photo of 38 Sinclair Terrace. That is the subject property looking east from the street. You can see that it is a largely one-story building that actually moves away from the street with the right side. Photograph number 3, I juxtaposed both the January and the May photograph to show that even in the winter, there's significant landscaping. You're looking into the reservation, which is vacant, past the property, and there's significant street trees that block the views of the properties, the houses, from the street. Photograph number 4 shows the relative screening, the dense screening between 48 Sinclair and the subject property. And we've juxtaposed again both the winter view and the summer view to show that it's largely evergreen and there's a significant buffer between the properties. Photograph number 5 is the common property line between 48 and 38 Sinclair Terrace to show that the house at 48 Sinclair, the portion that's closest to the subject property is actually the garage section with no windows, no residential windows on that side of the property. That property actually to the left of us deviates from the side yard setback. Our property in the existing condition actually meets the 1-story side yard setback. And then photograph number 6 to show some of the other houses in the neighborhood. That's the house at directly across the street from 38 Sinclair, which is a relatively large property on one of the oversized lots across the street. Going back to the A3 now,
The satellite photo.
satellite photograph. What it shows again is that the lot in question at 38 Sinclair, right next to 48 Sinclair, are relatively similar in size. You can see the footprints. The red footprint underneath is the existing house footprint. The blue on top with the yellow highlight is actually the proposed. The yellow portions of the building are the sections that require variance relief as to side yard setbacks. So we're compliant with regard to left setback, and you can see while we do have a yellow portion that sits into the front yard setback, you can see that for the most part, the bulk of the house sits significantly further back than the existing dwelling. So while the house is bigger than the existing one, and we are requesting some deviations with regard to the front yard setback and the side yard setback, you can see the main mass of the house does sit significantly further back from the existing house, and it sits further back from the house to the left. Also, what's noticeable on this is, again, the vast expanse of no neighbors to the east and the south mountain reservation, and you can see some of the sizes of the other properties that wrap around into Dorison Drive. You can see they go from 30,000, 46,000, 38,000, up to 2.7 acres, 2.5 acres as you move into Dorset Drive. So it really is an outlier of a transition from the R3 into the R4. And I think the only reason these were not included in the R4 is because of the two oversized lots directly across the street on Sinclair. If we now go to the drawing that was part of your application, this is the variance plot plan.
So, Ms. Fraser, we're not gonna mark that because it's part of the application package.
That's correct, but the one that you have up there, is that the shaded version?
The one that I have up here now should be the same. I think we should have gotten the shaded version in the packet.
We do have the shaded version.
Yeah, that-
So the only difference between the original variance plot plan that was originally submitted and this one is the shading to show the deviations.
We've added, yeah, besides moving the house, we've added the shading to show the details.
Okay,
And eliminated a variance, which Mr. Keller will get into.
So we did, in the old one, there was a variance on the left side, we've eliminated that, sliding the house over 1 foot. So we're fully compliant with the 1- and 2-story setback of 25 feet. It's now 26 feet to the first floor, 25 feet to the second floor. The house slid over, and the 3 highlighted yellow portions are the portions of the structure that violate either front yard setback or side yard setback. But I wanted to just talk about the unique nature of the property first. It's not just an undersized lot, it's actually an unusual shape as well, in that it's got this large tail that runs along the reservation and fills in that little pointed shape along the curvature of Sinclair Terrace, which means you have a very large portion of the property that's actually located in the front yard, in an area where between front yard and side yard setback is completely unusable. If we were to take a perpendicular line from that corner and draw our lot would actually only be a little less than 21,000 square feet, so much closer to the R4 20,000 square foot requirement. The area between the existing home and the street represents 8,360 square feet. So on the existing dwelling, there's actually 34% of the entire lot is in the front yard, and much of that's taken in that unique sort of tail. The other thing that was unique about this is the shape of it as it gets much narrower as we move back. That combined with the curving street does a couple of things. One is the way our ordinance measures lot width is you measure it by measuring between the setbacks, which means you're on an angle, which means you're increasing the distance of your lot width, which has a negative impact or has an adverse impact when you have to look at your combined side yard, which is a function of your lot width. So while we have 174.6 feet of total frontage across 2 curves across the property, the lot is actually 132 feet wide by ordinance. The perpendicular lot width at the setback is actually 127 feet, and it gets back to be only 84 feet at the rear of the property. So as you push a house further back, your side yards are getting more and more constrained. So the desire is to really keep the house bias as close to the front, where you can try to meet your side yard setbacks. The further back you push, you come back to nearly 84 feet, and you have to apply the combined side yards that are set by your much wider front yard. The house as it exists is a ranch from 1948. It's somewhat out of character with the existing neighborhood in terms of size and style. It also has a front-facing garage. One thing that's not permitted in either the R3 or R4 zone. Both this house and the lot next to us, because they're considerably undersized, they have front-facing garages. The applicant elected to eliminate the front-facing garages as part of this application, which does have some ramifications on the design. I would also note that the existing dwelling does, there's about 7 square feet that violates the single side setback. When you look at the combined side yard setback, there's actually between 309 and 357 square feet of the existing house violates the combined side yard setback, depending on which side you hold. So the existing dwelling has deviations for front-facing garages, as well as combined side yard and individual side yard on the right, which the application seeks to mitigate some of those existing nonconformities. With regard to the plot plan, we worked long and hard, or the architect worked long and hard for many generations. The irregular shape made it very difficult to design a house that was consistent with the neighborhood, while also eliminating the front garage. And a decision was made early on to bias the house to the right to try to keep the variances originally to a minimum and ultimately eliminate any variances as it relates to side yard setback and throw all of the side yard deviations onto the reservation side where there are no immediate neighbors. And frankly, when you're looking at the site, there is a fence that kind of runs through the property, but it's almost impossible to tell. If you're on Sinclair, it would be impossible to tell from Sinclair whether this house received any variances because that perception of the lot lines are not written in stone out there. There's nothing that you can perceive. The tree cover covers that quite well. So from the perception is that this would be a fully conforming house and that you'd never see any of the deviations, and they're fairly small in size to the right side. One of the lot shape really lends itself because of this this front little prow that sticks out in terms of the buildable envelope. The normal response to developing a house on this property would be a courtyard, where you pull the garage 90 degrees to the house, pull it forward, and you put a big parking court in the front yard, and the garages will then face the side yard, not the street. The decision was made early on not to go with that. One of the problems with that was that if you do that, if you crank that forward and push the entire property back, the house back, is you're pushing yourself back into the narrow portion of the property. And then actually we were concerned about the neighbor because the further back we pushed that, the more we intercepted their view from their backyard and patio out into the reservation. So it was decided quickly to not go with that typical garage courtyard, but to go with something where we did have a crank in the building, but the garages were actually facing the back, so that would present itself as a court of the house. And we would deal with the driveway that came up the right side and had garage doors that faced into the reservation. We thought it was a better plan.
Rich, if you just would point out the difference in terms of the setback for the main facade of the home.
Sure. And I'll get to these when I quantify the variances, but in the old house, our front offset was 42, and it ran pretty much parallel, perpendicular to the sideline. Under the proposed application, we're at 57.92, so there's a considerable, it's a 15-foot additional setback to the main mass of the house. However, that garage wing, which is angled, does cross the required average setback of 41.4 feet, and it crosses over to be 35.36 feet. So we are dipping a toe into that front yard setback.
Just in that corner, correct?
Just in that corner. And that actually represents the total amount of encroachment in that area is actually 45 square feet. In terms of the grading and drainage plan, the property is fairly low graded to the back and to the right. We haven't done a grading plan, but we've seen there's nothing that would stop us from complying with the requirements of the grading ordinance and securing a grading permit. It's actually a well-graded site. It drops quite steeply in the back. If you've been in the backyard, you see there are no neighbors to the back because it really looks over the top of most of the other development. So it looks out to the South Mountain Reservation, another half mile to the northeast. So there really are no neighbors to the back because the lots drop so much and those lots get so much larger, which was evidenced in the house on Dorison. We're looking right over the top of that house here. You can see the retaining wall as the terraces down. So there's really no neighbor affected to the rear, and there's no neighbor affected to the right. That's the solution that was chosen with regard to and I would you look at our site data box on the upper right-hand side, just to quantify the variances before I turn it over to the architect. We do need variances for combined side yard setback, where 46.41 feet is required. And that's again a function of that kind of unusually long line across the angled property. The existing is 32.7, which is under by 13.71. It's an existing non-conforming condition. And the proposed is 40.93. So we're still under the required, but only by 5.48 feet. The second story setback, we need deviations on the right side in two places. One is the little bit of the roof over the garage, and a second little section in the back of the main house adjacent to the garages, where 25 feet is required. The proposed right setback is 15.93, so we are under by 9.07 feet. But again, that is toward the reservation where there are no immediate neighbors. The portion of the house that violates the setback is 110 square feet, and there's 15 square feet of the garage that violates that setback. With regard to the garage, it's also required that we have 28 feet from the garage to the property line. And measuring it perpendicularly, which is going to be back up, but measuring perpendicularly, we're at 20.22, where 28 feet is required, so we're under by 7.78 feet. The realities I'll talk about when I talk about the planning for the variances. Two of the garages will have nominal look of backup that works. One garage will be somewhat restricted, and that's generally the one garage that will be used for bicycles and snow blowers and things like that. We also need a front yard setback. And that's what we indicated. We've got the 45 square feet that dips its toe into that required setback. The requirement is 41.4. The existing is at 42. The proposed is at 35.36. That is under by 6.04. Again, only 45 square feet. And finally, building coverage. Permitted in the zone is 14%. The existing is 11.84%. The proposed comes in at 14%, which is 1% over. We're proposing 3,405 square feet of footprint, which is over by 1%, with 240 square feet. Again, that comes in exactly up to 14% that's permitted. I think that goes over the.
Wait, building coverage, 13% is
13%
permitted,
is permitted, we're at 14.
and you're at 14.
Right.
And how many square feet is the difference?
We're over by 240 square feet.
And so, Mr. Keller, just a couple of quick things. With regard to the driveway, the driveway as existing with the front-facing garage is located on the portion of the lot that's closest to the neighbor, and by virtue of this proposal, you're moving it to the other side of the lot, correct?
Correct. We're moving to the right side along the reservation to squeak in between the house and the reservation, so we have a rear-facing garage on the right side. So we are moving the center of activity, besides moving the house, we're moving the center of activity away from the neighboring property to the west.
And while a little over 1,000 square feet of the existing house is closer to the street than the proposed house, the only about 350 square feet of the proposed house is closer than the existing house. If that makes any sense, right?
Yep, that is correct, and that was further on in my notes, so I have it here as well. Essentially, yeah, what was asked is, if we look, probably easiest to see on the A3, is the area of red that sits in front of the blue proposed house. So that area that we're removing is so the area of red that's being removed is actually 1,074 square feet. And the portion that we're adding that's in front of the existing house, so this portion right in here that's in blue and yellow, that represents a total of 340 square feet. So on net, we're moving more than 600 square feet of house further back, or eliminating that runs on the extension of that 41-foot existing setback, or 42-foot existing setback.
And with regard to building coverage, if this lot was fully conforming at 29,000 square feet, you would be permitted to have 3,770 square feet of building coverage, and we're only proposing a little over 3,400 square feet, correct?
That is correct. If the lot was conforming at 29,000 29,000 square feet, our building coverage would only be 11.75% of the 14. So clearly, if this line were straightened out through the reservation to the point where we could get 29,000 square feet, first of all, if that line was straightened out, we would be able to eliminate the front yard setback, eliminate all the side yard setbacks, and eliminate the coverage as well.
So other than the variances that you have pointed out based on your zoning table on your variance plot plan, the application fully conforms to all the other requirements in the zone,
Yeah,
correct?
I do want to, and I'll go, again, my planning testimony, I'll go over that, but I do want to make one clarification in discussing with the architect. We did have, again, sort of a moving target over many iterations, but the FAR as proposed is a little higher than shown on the zoning table. It was still conforming. We do not need a D variance. We showed it as 5687. Turns out it's actually 6,042, which is at 24.8%. So there is a correction on the FAR, but it is still fully conforming to FAR, which is the general metric we look at when we look at over-intensification of use of our property. That's why it's a D variance under municipal land. So we're fully compliant with the
So,
FAR.
so what is it, if it's not 2336?
But I think I said it's 24.8.
24.8. And that was 6,042 square feet.
That's correct.
I'm sorry, how many square feet?
6,042.
6042 is the complete FAR. And that is compliant with what's permitted in the R3 zone.
So, Mr. Keller, I think that probably concludes the engineering portion of your testimony.
Actually, sure, took a few comments from my planning testimony already, but yes, it does.
I couldn't help myself, Rich. I have no further questions from Mr. Keller at this time. If
Are
any
there
board
questions
members have
for this witness from the board members? I have one. Can you tell us what, if any, attempt was made to bring the building coverage, which is over by only 240 square feet, into conformity?
I think it's probably best for the architect to answer that, and we went through multiple iterations, started
Fine,
out much larger.
I'll hold that question. Any other questions for this witness at this time? Engineering testimony only.
Okay, and we'll be bringing Mr. Keller back momentarily for his planning testimony.
Proceed.
So with that, I'd like to call on Mr. Sestero, please, from Pell Design Group.
I do. Joseph Sestero, C-E-S-T-A-R-O.
Mr. Sestero, if you could please provide your occupation for the open area that you can show with architecture.
Sure, I'm a licensed architect by the state of New Jersey. I was licensed in 2011. I hold a Bachelor's of Architecture from New Jersey Institute of Technology. I work at Appel Design Group Architects. I've been there for 7 years. I have not been in front of this board, but I've been in front of several boards before. Recently, Newark, Montclair, Mountain Lakes, Randolph, Paramus.
So you've been qualified by zoning and planning boards in Essex County and Morris County in the field of architecture?
Correct.
And your license is currently valid?
Correct.
And you were duly qualified on those occasions when you testified, correct?
Correct.
Mr. Chairman?
Qualifications are accepted.
Could you spell your last name for me again?
Sure. C-E-S-T-A-R-O.
Thank you.
Mr. Sestero, you participated in the preparation of the architectural elevations and floor plan with regards to this application?
Correct.
And you're familiar with the property and the surrounding area, correct?
Yes.
So if you would provide an overview of the project from an architectural standpoint, and in doing so, and during the presentation, I advise you to address Mr. Steinberg's question that was raised.
Sure, sure. Let me just throw up the plan. same of what you guys have.
So let's just be clear, Mr. Sestero. So what you've put on the easel is a plan entitled New Single-Family Home, Vogel Residence, 38 Sinclair Terrace, Millburn, with a original date of October 19, 2018, with a most recent revision date of April 23rd, 2019, correct?
Correct.
I'm just ready to, you don't need to mark that, correct?
No.
Thank you. Please proceed.
As Mr. Keller touched on, before we start with the proposed plan, the existing house was originally constructed in 1948. It's undersized, kind of poorly sited, ranch-style dwelling. The garage is front-facing. There's only a partial basement, it's a low ceiling height. After our first task was reviewing what was existing, and it seemed there's limited potential for an effective addition or renovation to the current house. Part of this existing structure is non-conforming as well, as Mr. Keller pointed out. So if we did any kind of addition, likely on a second floor, we'd run into variances anyways. So based upon the way the house is sited and the lot geometry, existing conditions, the structure, we decided we can't effectively or efficiently renovate. So then we worked along with the clients and site engineer to brainstorm and looked at numerous options for designs to address several points, including the uniquely shaped property and the curve of Sinclair Terrace, the ordinance and the way setbacks are measured, setback calculation and geometry, how it tied to the front lot width, the taper lot, the setbacks or larger setbacks due to the radial front property line, and how the lot narrows towards the rear. We also want to take advantage of the open reservation property to the right, as there's a nice view and no neighbors. We also wanted to bias to the right side of the lot, just to respect the house on the left. Similar to the driveway location, we wanted to flip to the right side of the property to kind of to limit any vehicular disturbance with the house on the left side. The applicants have been residents of Short Hills for several years. Initially, they have envisioned a larger house on this lot. We were limited by the FAR cap of the R3 zone. When we started doing preliminary design work with a conforming footprint, which ended up leading to a very tight L-shaped or courtyard house, again, that Mr. Keller was explaining on the site plan, it pushes the house way back on the site, because of the unique characteristics of the site. We realized it just didn't make a lot of sense on this particular site to go with that route. After
You certainly, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Sure.
And you certainly were aware in deciding how to appropriately design the house given the existing property's constraints and the existing deviations, correct, from the existing structure?
Correct.
Go on.
After a few preliminary designs, we were able to get close enough to meet the R4 building coverage. It's kind of a balancing act with the zoning requirements and the site, as well as respecting the neighbor and the neighborhood. The site is undersized. It's more consistent with the R4 neighborhood. And again, to reiterate, the building coverage is 13% in the R3 zone, 14% in the R4 zone, which is more consistent with the rest of the Sinclair neighborhood. Another thing about this site is the long curb line, so it gives the impression of a much larger site. We tried to almost follow that with the house, with the bend in the house, to kind of play off of the shape of the front of the site. So, as mentioned again, the variances I'll just go through. The combined yard setback.
Right, so Mr. Keller went through, what the variances are. So I don't know if you can just briefly touch upon that.
Sure. The combined side yard setback, it's a small, kind of pie-shaped space. It's as mentioned, not very impactful or even visible from the street. The second story setback, which is only on the right side, We're actually improving the existing non-conforming condition. And again, we biased the house on the right side, the reservation side, so it's very small triangular areas that are encroaching. The side yard setback for the garage facing side property line is 20.22, where 20 is required. This is a byproduct of kind of stretching the house into the front areas. Because of the shape of the site, we want to get a mass of the house towards the front corner, again, in order to push the house as closer to the Sinclair, because the property lines, the setbacks kind of taper as they go back. Also, we feel this is going to be a better dynamic for the house, the lower roof over the garage. The form and scale of the house will, we think, appear better from the street. On top of that, it also hides the garage doors completely from the street. The front yard setback, again, the encroachment is a small triangle. It's something we worked out with the site engineer very closely with many iterations. We felt this encroachment was preferred over the left side setback, and every inch we move to the rear, this side gets more narrow. We also wanted to preserve the frontage of the house to be more consistent with the neighboring properties. And again, we don't think the front corner of the single story of the front garage will really be perceived, and we believe it adds to the design. The last one is building coverage. We're at 14%. We believe this is more consistent with the properties surrounding this property. Also, having the garage on an angle, which we feel really responds to the site, often creates some inefficiencies in the plan. We have a couple rooms that are not quite square, and we have a couple spaces in the core of the house that are voids, because we feel that it's more appropriately laid out on a site, and you'll get those angles and stuff inside. So that's one of the reasons why the house, in some spots, are a little larger, some spaces. Reducing the house further, in our opinion, just wouldn't be consistent with the development pattern of the neighborhood, as well as the wants and needs of our client.
And Mr. Sestero, in your with your familiarity with the neighborhood, most of the homes in the area have three-car garages.
Correct.
And you did look at, based on some gentle prodding by certain professionals, you did look to see if there was any way that any of the variances could be further reduced in deviation. And so this is the product of numerous plans, correct?
Correct.
That resulted in shrinking and tightening, correct?
Correct.
And there's, and so that the building coverage that is being proposed, although it is at 14%, that is not only consistent with the R4 zone, which is across the street and in the surrounding area, but certainly if this was a fully conforming 29,000 square foot lot, that the proposed building coverage would be well under what is permitted in the zone, correct?
Correct.
So is there any other information you want to provide to the board with regard to the architectural elements of this application? Maybe by way of summary or otherwise. About considering the fact that it's the unique shape of the lot and the size of the lot.
I mean, again, I feel the unique shape of the lot is kind of what brought us to this floor plan. I think it responds to the site in several different ways of taking advantage of the view to the reserve, protecting the neighbor to the left, the curve of the street. I think the form of the garage lower and the continuous roof from that garage up to the rest of the house softens the front yard variance.
And eliminating the front-facing garage
I think is
and
huge.
moving the driveway where there's cars right next to the neighbor on a daily basis and moving it to the other side of the lot closest to the reservation.
Correct.
I have no further questions for Mr. Sestero at this time.
Are there any questions from board members? I neglected to ask before, are there any questions of the first witness or this witness from anyone in the audience? Next
Okay,
witness.
thank you, Mr. Steiner. Thank you, Mr.
Did you-
Wait,
One question.
wait, board members have a
No,
couple
Mr.
questions.
I'm sorry.
I had a question.
Sorry.
Is it possible for you to show us on the elevations where those little triangles would be?
Good question. It goes on an angle, it's really,
Just if you can just, for Ms. McNett, if you can just approximate where those areas are, and maybe Mr. Keller might be able to assist as well.
So let me show you first some plans. It's kind of coming right through. There's a light line here. I'm just going to darken.
So wait, Mr. Sestero, for the record, you're referring to ZB3, which is part of your architectural plan, which depicts the floor plan,
Correct.
okay? So if you can just describe for the record where you're specifically referring to.
Okay. So, you know what, first we'll start with the front corner here. There's a setback going right through.
Okay, so now that you've taken your pen and you've marked it up, we're gonna mark that as an exhibit, which is A4, which will be marked up ZB3.
Right,
So that's going right through here.
Here, representing what? You gotta use your words for the record.
The front elevation, the right-of-most gable would kind of be slicing through here. The plane is going to be difficult to put that's the piece. So again, that's kind of through here on the right side elevation through the top of the gable of the garage. And there's also this here.
and that's the piece that's, I believe, a 45 square foot
Correct.
deviation.
That's the only portion of the entire structure that violates the front yard setback.
Actually, maybe it's better to show it here on this yellow triangle here.
All right, so wait, hold on. You're referring now to which plan? You're referring to the variance plot plan?
Yes, drawing number 1,
Okay. And
Mason Keller.
where are you referring on the variance plot plan?
So there's the 3 yellow triangles here. The smallest on the right rear of the garage. This is the 7-story variance. 6-story setback. And that is coming out of, back on my drawing on the right side elevation, right in here.
That's on ZB1.
So we do 1, right side elevation.
Wait, did you just mark that?
No, it's not.
Okay,
No.
go ahead.
And then
That's the second story side yard setback.
so that, again, on my ZB1, in a similar spot, the right-of-most gable on the right side elevation, be cutting through up here. Again, at an angle that's,
Okay, and Mr.
like to mark this.
What's that?
I'd actually like to mark the
Well,
ZB1,
when we get back to
Yeah,
your
when we get to
your
you, we'll
testimony,
mark it.
because I think we can draw that line.
Right,
We'll be
we're gonna
okay.
clean that up. I just wanted to be responsive to Ms. McNett's question.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
So
Thank
for
you, Mr.
now,
Sestero.
all we have is that we have marked sheet ZB3 as A4.
Correct. Ms. Frencher. Okay, so if there's no other questions for Mr. Sestero, and I believe there's no questions from the public, I'd like to recall Mr. Keller. So, Mr. Keller, before we get to your planning testimony, there was a question asked about what portion of the plan actually encroaches.
Sure. And I'd like to mark the ZB1.
So we're gonna mark as A5, we're gonna call that marked up ZB1.
So if we look at the setback, it comes almost near the central window. So it comes. And it's about 2/3 of the way between the corner and the first window. these are at an angle, so it's foreshortened, but if you take about 2/3 of the way between this and the window, let's so that's the portion of the house that actually encroaches. That's the 45 square feet that encroaches into the front yard setback. And then if we look at the this back section of the home here, it slopes back, so you're probably talking about a portion that is not quite to the center, but to the right of it, so it's probably something like that portion there.
So you just drew in a triangle on the second floor, Mr. Keller.
Correct. So that's the portion of the second floor that violates the right side setback, and the little unique shape in the front is the what I refer to as the toe of the garage that sits into the front yard setback.
Right, and that toe of the garage, as Ms. Fraser said, is about 45 square feet.
45 square feet, correct.
That's good, thank you.
And the piece that you drew as the triangle, that's the 110 square feet?
That's part of the 110. It recedes back into the drawing, but that's part of the 110 square feet,
Okay.
correct.
So, Mr. Keller, you've already provided engineering testimony, and you've heard the testimony from our architect, Mr. Sestero. As a professional planner on the project, can you review the variance relief that is required in connection with this application, as well as discussing positive and negative criteria required for that variance relief?
Yes. I would point out again that these are all C variances. There are no D variances. There are no intensity of use variances, no FAR, no 10% height, no height variances. They're all C variances, and they're a combination of C1 and C2. C1 applies where there's some existing physical feature or features of the lot. In this case, we believe the shape and the size that create a hardship in developing the existing property without the need for variance relief. Generally, a variance under C1 must be grounded in conditions that are peculiar to the particular lot as distinguished from other properties in the zone. And the hardship standard for the C1 does not require that the applicant prove that without the variance, the property would be zoned into inutility, or that a conforming house could not be built. The C1 applicant needs only to demonstrate that the property's unique characteristics inhibit the extent to which the property can be used in a manner consistent with the neighborhood. We believe that to be the case for most of the variance relief requested. With regard to the combined side yard, again, the
Proposed is 40.93, we're under by 5.48, so we're making it better. And this is exacerbated by the peculiar way that the lot width is measured on this angle because it has this long tail. The metric for setting lot width is much higher, which creates an excessive combined side yard setback. I would point out, if we look at the rear of the proposed home, at which the lot is only 113.5 feet in width, if we applied the 35-foot combined yard setback at that point, we would only require to have 39.73, where 40.93 is proposed. So clearly, our fixed points are towards the back of the house. But if we look at it, clearly it depends on where you take the lot width as to whether we need variance relief. Under the ordinance, we need it, but it's an unusual lot in that it keeps, as it gets further into the back, the lot width shrinks, and the required side yard, actually at the back of the property, we are conforming. With regard to the, and I'm going to just touch base on, I'm going to get more fully into the negative criteria in a minute, but with regard to the that variance relief requested, we think there's no negative impact on the neighborhood. The increased side yard setback, we've increased the side yard setback on the left side, and we've taken any deviations in terms of combined side yard on the right towards the reservation. With regard to the second story setback, again, 15.93 is proposed where 25 feet is required. The house is actually moving 5.35 feet away from the neighbor on the left, but we are under by 9.07 on the right side. And again, the geometry presents a hardship as this lot keeps throttling down to only an 84-foot lot width at the rear of the property. The increased side yard setback to the left neighbor went from 19.65 up to 25 feet. That's an improvement to the left neighbor. We believe there's no impact on the neighborhood. Again, we've taken any of the deviation on the right side towards the South Mountain Reservation. And again, there's only on the right side
there's only 125 square feet of encroachment, 110 square feet in the back, and 15 square feet in a portion of the attic over the garage. With regard to the garage setback, 28 feet is required. We're proposed at 20.22, so we're under 7 by 7.78. This ordinance is intended to limit movement of vehicles too close to adjoining houses with a 5-foot setback and 23 feet of backup for a combined 28-foot requirement. Again, we can't provide that due to the excessive narrowing of the lot. If we push the house back to try to meet the front yard setback, it only gets worse. We believe that we have something that will work for 2 of the 3 cars. It'll work for the 3 garage bays as intended to be used, with no negative impact on the neighborhood. It can't be seen by the neighbors. Most of the homes in the neighborhood have 3-car garages. There are no houses to the east, so we're not backing up too close to any of those properties. We are maintaining the 5-foot setback to the property line regardless. With regard to the building coverage, we see that as a C2 variance, and this applies where the purposes of the Land Use Act are advanced and the benefits resulting from the deviation substantially outweigh any detriment. We think the building coverage where 13% is permitted, we're proposing 14%, we're over by 1%, or 240 square feet, is relatively minimal and can't be perceived from the street. The special reasons under 4055 D2 of the municipal land use law are numerous. First is A, in promoting general welfare. We believe that this house will be consistent with others in the neighborhood in both the size and scope. It provides for adequate air, light, and open space. By moving the dwelling away from the neighbor, we're providing the fully required distance between our properties. Actually, our neighbor's a little close to us, but we're providing for air, light, and open space to the only neighbor we have, and certainly having no impact to the reservation to the east. We are also promoting the establishment of appropriate population densities and concentration to contribute to the well-being of neighborhoods and communities. This is an appropriate size home for this neighborhood. We're also providing for a sufficient space and appropriate location for a variety of residential uses. This is still a small house for the neighborhood, so we're still providing for a variety of housing types. It's just one that's consistent with the fabric of the local R4 and not with the R3, but we're in a unique area of the town. We're also promoting a desirable visual environment. We are eliminating a rundown 1948 ranch and presenting an attractive home that is not a garage courtyard scheme, eliminating a front-facing garage. And we're also promoting valuable natural resources because by trying to meet the front yard setback, and certainly even if we try to meet the size, you can imagine you take a certain amount of program, whether we're over by 240 or not, if you squish it together and you push it back, you will push more property into the rear yard. And so you'll have additional lot coverage. You'll take additional rear yard area, which we try to keep sacrosanct for recreation of adjacent properties, so that we all set a rough rear yard line so that we're not having one lot that's significantly further back than the others. So we think that this actually promotes the conservation of valuable natural resources. For all of these, so I think we meet the positive criteria under C1 and C2 for all the variance relief requested. We also need to demonstrate that we meet the negative criteria, and that's the 2-prong criteria, that there's no substantial detriment to the public good, and there's no substantial impairment to the intent and purpose of the master plan and zoning ordinance. And I would point out the word substantial is in there, because there's always going to be some minor detriment with any development, but the word is there substantial detriment to the public good? We think that there's no detriment to the character of the neighborhood here. This is an undersized lot within the zone. It is the second smallest lot within the nearby R3 zone, and functionally, if you take out that tail that wraps around along Sinclair, it is the smallest lot in the neighborhood. And again, as discussed before, if the lot was conforming at 29,000 square feet, our 3,405 square feet would represent 11.75% coverage, which would be fully compliant. I would point out that we are fully conforming to the nearby R4 standards. Because this lot is so small, that 1% is only 240 square feet. I would point out that the neighboring house at 48 Sinclair, was represented by potential objecting counsel who've now endorsed the project. That house, we looked at I obtained both the house plans for that when it was expanded back in 1990, and I also looked at the tax records for the town. Based upon the tax records, That property is 3,100 square feet over 21,746 square feet, or 14.26% building coverage. And using the house plans,
14.62?
14.26.
26.
Using the house plans that we obtained from the neighbor and their survey, we actually were a little less at 2984. We don't know if it was built that way. The tax records would be as built. Based upon the plans that were provided, it was 2,984 square feet, which is 14.00%, right on the button, which is again the same percentage we're requesting as the only other undersized lot in the neighborhood. With regard to the setback deviations, the architect has worked painstakingly over many iterations to try to design a functional home that complied with the zoning ordinance. The unusual shape with the front yard tail, the narrowness made it, or the increasing narrowness as you move back, made it impossible to design a functional home with contemporary amenities without the need for variance relief. As indicated, only a small portions of the home dip into the required setbacks. While the main mass of the house exceeds the requirements, the area of the, went over this before and I found my notes, the area of the existing house that is closer to the street than the proposed house is 1,074. So we're taking 1,074 square feet out of that front yard, and we're adding 349 square feet back in with the garage that, as I said, kind of dips into the front yard setback. Again, the deviations are all towards the reservation side of the proposed dwelling. The undersized lot made it difficult to meet the building coverage requirements. The lot, again, conforms to the R4 zone at 14%. The South Mountain Reservation makes the house feel fully compliant. Again, the perception, because lot lines are invisible, even with some fences in the area, is that this would feel certainly like it's compliant. If the lot line was another 7 feet to the east, we would actually be compliant with coverage. If that line was another 12 to 15 feet, we'd be fully compliant with everything, because we could slide the house back fairly easily without taking up too much rear yard. We don't have to slide it back about 5 feet. If we try to slide that back now, we have to exacerbate all the side yards. We would probably have the second. If we tried to make the front yard corner setback compliant, we push the house back, and we would probably have the second floor, which would deviate less than 15 feet, which is the single-story setback. So the decision was made to have that one little section. I would point out on both our exhibit A3 that as you're coming down Sinclair and you're curving in a compound curve where it starts to curve further, I don't think you'll ever perceive that that's a violation of the front yard setback. Also shown by the photographs in, oh boy, no, sorry, I'll forget that photograph. I think if you look at the A3, you'll see as you're curving around here, that small portion that sits in, I don't think that'll ever be perceivable as being less than the required 42-foot minimum. The house actually still, we believe, fits in with the neighborhood homes. It is still smaller than the other R3 homes in the area. It is consistent with sizes of other R4 homes. It does not certainly overwhelm the neighborhood. The neighborhood has a variety of house sizes, depending upon when the house was built. This area was developed in the 40s, and back in the 40s, at least through 1980, as late as 1984, maybe a little beyond that, the R3 and the R4 zone permitted 20% coverage. Up until 1989, at least, both the R3 and the R4 zone permitted 15% coverage. And it was until sometime just before 2002 that we went to the requirement of 13% for the R3 and 14% for the R4, recognizing that perhaps the larger lot should have a slightly smaller lot area. But a lot of the development, and certainly a lot of the additions that went on in this neighborhood prior to 1989, means that the neighborhood is full of homes that are up to between 15 and 20%, as was permitted at the time. And so certainly to have another house that's at 14% is not out of character with the neighborhood. With regard to the existing property, any of the deviations are also minimized, or the negative impact is minimized by the landscaping. There are mature trees that are on the left side that don't need to be disturbed. It's a function of this project. We can also add additional landscaping both to the front and sides. One well-placed tree would pretty much hide any of the deviations associated with the front yard deviation of the garage. And I would point out that there are some nice large trees in the back that would be, if we tried to meet the front yard setback and meet the side yards and squish this house and did a courtyard home, we'd push that house back and we'd take out down additional mature trees in the background. I would point out again that we are fully compliant with the height requirements, the FAR, which is the metric of overdevelopment, rear setback, rear and unoccupied, we're all compliant with. So we certainly think that there's no negative impact on the neighborhood. There's also no impairment of the master plan and zoning ordinance. Among the primary goals of the master plan from the 2018 master plan re-examination, goal number 1 on page 43 was to promote the character of the township as a small suburb of the highest quality, and under that objective 1.01 was to protect the character of established residential neighborhoods and encourage land use and development at an appropriate scale and density. We certainly think that notwithstanding that 1% deviation on building coverage, this is certainly consistent with the neighborhood where you have 13, 14, 15% coverages. We believe that this allows for the removal of a home that is programmatically inconsistent with homes desired in 2019. It removes a home that is out of character with the neighborhood in being significantly undersized with a front-facing garage. And the size is consistent with the neighborhood. We think that it is consistent with the intent and purpose of the master plan. We think that it is consistent with the, if there's no negative impact on either the master plan or the zoning ordinance, the intent of the zoning ordinance. We think there's only benefits. I don't see any negatives represented, and largely it's due to the fact that we've been able to bias any of the minor encroachments, and I think we've really minimized them, as is really
Well exhibited by both the highlighted yellow portions on our site plan or plot plan, as well as on A3. They've really been kept to a minimum and biased
to the right side. We think it's actually a good application, and we ask that you approve it.
So for all the reasons that you stated to justify the relief under C1 or C2, you believe that the variances that are being requested by the applicant should all be granted for those reasons?
Yes.
I have nothing further from Mr.
Thank you. Are there any questions from board members?
From the public?
Yeah, I'm going to ask them. Any questions from members of the public of this witness in his planning capacity? Anything more, counsel?
No, other than to make it short,
Please.
concluding statement once the public has an opportunity.
Yeah. Is there anyone in the public who has a comment he or she would like to make with respect to this application? I see none, I hear none, counsel.
There's one thing with that.
Oh, is there? Come forward, please. Didn't see your hand. You have to be sworn to make a statement.
Yes. Ronnie Weinstein, RONNI, WEIN, I'm at 20 Dorison Drive, so I'm a backyard neighbor. And I can say that it's time for a change in that house on Sinclair. I do walk around there. I think this would only be an improvement to the neighborhood.
Thank you. Are there any other comments from the public?
Yes. Laura Janay, 35. Janay, Janay. 35 Sinclair.
Where is your home in?
I'm actually right across the street. So I'm here basically to support the Vogels, saying it would be a great addition to the neighborhood. What we would look across the street from would be a beautiful house. So I think that what they've put into their plans it will look great in the neighborhood.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else?
Yes, I do. Douglas Siegel, 21 Sinclair Terrace, Short Hills. I am on the same side of the street as the Janay family, Laura Janay. I'd like the board to understand that what's presented architecturally for me, being a dog walker every day, with the setback being pushed closer to the reservation and the garage on the right side does a couple things. Aesthetically, for us in the community or in the neighborhood, it just adds a beautiful structure, a home to the community. But in addition, what's been presented by, I believe, the engineer and the architect, is that the side setback where this tail that has been spoken about is truly wasted property. And if our neighbors could build a home that could support their family and what they want to achieve, one, we're thrilled for it, for us as a family and as a community, but equally, it's a better use of the premise. So we are an advocate of it, my wife Dana and I, so that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in the audience? I see no one else. Counsel?
So I'll be uncharacteristically brief. Typically with applications, as you know, I either lose my voice or I come close to losing my voice by the time I get home at midnight. And when I work with Mr. Keller, that's always the exception to the rule for sure. His comprehensive testimony and that of the architect certainly is supportive of this application. It's certainly very, very helpful where you have two agreeable neighbors, one being South Mountain Reservation with a whole bunch of trees. They haven't said anything. And on the left-hand side, you have a neighbor who initially was had some questions with regard to the application, but kudos to the Vogels who spent the time and their professional team, and we took the care to carefully go through and explain to the neighbor, and particularly to Mr. Gazarovski, all the reasons why variances are justified for this particular application. This is not your typical application where you are in the middle of some subdivision and there's issues that are being faced by a multitude of neighbors. Here we do have a unique situation, whether it's the lot size, the lot shape, the fact that it's near South Mountain Reservation or right next door to it, and the fact that we have the same building coverage as proposed as the only other lot that is undersized in this zone, I think speaks volumes, as you heard from Mr. Keller. House is commensurate with the neighborhood. We're eliminating existing nonconformities. You heard from the neighbors who are in support of this application that there's mature trees in the surrounding area that certainly will be preserved. And the fact, as you just heard from Mr. Siegel, you don't know where the line ends on the right-hand side anyway. So certainly any deviations in terms of the setbacks are going to be indiscernible with regard to this neighborhood and the fact that the character of the neighborhood will not be impacted. And finally, as you heard from Mr. Gazarovski before he left early in the proceedings, the only thing his clients were concerned about was that the architectural design that is being proposed to you is maintained, because he frankly found it, and his clients found it, extremely attractive. And as Ms. Frazier pointed out, that's certainly always a condition of any resolution of approval. And so we ask you for all those reasons and those pursuant to the testimony to grant us relief, and we always thank the board for its consideration of the application. Thank you.
Is there anyone else in the audience? I'll give you one last chance to speak. I see none and I hear none. I'll close the public portion of the meeting and ask board members if they have some comments that they would like to make before a motion is made.
I'll start off. I'm very happy to see that you have reduced the plan as you have and take into consideration the neighbor. I think it's a much better shift to have the driveway on the other side. I'm sitting here and I'm always amused when professionals say, well, if our lot conformed, we could do this. And I'm saying, well, if I had blonde hair, I'd be Marilyn Monroe. So I don't really take that into a lot of consideration. But I like what you've done, and I think that you have eliminated any FAR issues. And I think because it's close to the reservation, there isn't going to be that kind of an impact. So I can support the application.
Any other comments? I'll make some comments of my own in a minute.
Echoing what Mary said, I like the fact that you work things out with the neighbors. I think that's a great move. Since the east side of that property is right on the reservation, and as one of the neighbors mentioned, that property line does become blurred, and I visited this property now twice. Since that is the more affected side of the property, I don't find it to be as worrisome as if it was on the other side, so I would support this application.
A comment that I have is that I've heard from Mr. Keller twice tonight that the primary metric of overdevelopment is floor area ratio. I want to say that I think that building coverage is a metric of overdevelopment as well. Maybe not quite as much as floor area ratio, but you have a building here, and I want to say that as far as I'm concerned, the side yard and front yard setbacks, combined yard setbacks, I could support the application. I have grave problems with the building coverage. You have a proposal here of covering 3,405 square feet. And you miss adhering to the ordinance by 240 square feet, which is roughly, without I'm just doing the math in my head, it's about 7%. Is that close? Yeah, okay. It's about 7%. In a house of this size, it would not take much to find 240 square feet to reduce the lot coverage. And I think that...
Building coverage.
The building coverage, I'm sorry. That metric is very important to me, and we do have an unusually shaped lot. On the other hand, we're starting from scratch, meaning this is a new building that is proposed. It is clearly going to be more attractive on this lot than the building that's there now. And despite the comments from the architect, my guess is that if somebody walked into his office today and said, either you find 240 square feet of building coverage to cut back on, or 7%, or we'll find another architect, he'll find that 240 square feet in a heartbeat. So my sense here is that I would like to see, and I will call for 2 votes on this application. The first, a combined vote on the side yard setbacks and the front yard setbacks, the combined yard setbacks, and a separate vote on building coverage. And frankly, my vote at the moment, and I'd be happy to hear from other members of the board, my vote would be, tentatively at least, would be to, support the setback variances, but oppose the building coverage variance. Any other board members?
So, let me ask you, Joe, what consideration do you give to the fact that it's an undersized lot? And the fact
Well,
that it has
I give the following. I've heard this argument made 1,000 times in this room over the last 14 years, where people argue, well, it's an undersized lot. In my judgment, you have an undersized lot, you cut down what you want to do on it to fit the undersized lot. Now, this lot also has peculiar side yards and some wasted space up front.
Right.
I take that into account, and that's one of the reasons why I said I think the proposed setback variances are supportable. But when you have an undersized lot, my view is you cut down what you want to do on it. Anyone else? Okay, if There are no objections from board members.
Hey, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to ask if you...
Excuse me, the public portion has been closed. Do you have something more you want to say?
I don't have anything with regard to the evidence. I just have a procedural question.
Just hold on 1 minute. Is there a motion to reopen the public portion of the meeting? Mary?
Second.
Is second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Sorry.
Speak.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know from time to time, even as a board attorney, when there's circumstances as presented by what the chairman is proposing, where you're taking a split vote, I sometimes make a recommendation to the board that under those circumstances, that before the board formally votes, that they take what is known as a straw poll, just to help the applicant understand a little bit as to where the board is coming from with regard to the application, so that the board or the applicant understands what the consequences are of a denial of an application with regard to res judicata and having to possibly reapply. So in the interest of, I guess, it's judicial efficiency and Millburn Township residents, I would ask that under the circumstances, if you're calling for, in essence, a bifurcated vote or a split vote for the different variances, that consideration may be had to possibly a straw poll with regard particularly to the building coverage variance.
We normally don't do that, but in this case, I think it might be appropriate. So let's do a quick straw vote, and this is not binding on anybody. I want to make that clear. If we were to vote separately on the setbacks, how many think at this moment they would vote to support the setback variances? That looks unanimous. What about the building coverage variance?
Who would be in favor?
Who would be in favor?
5 people.
Okay.
Okay, so I think under the circumstances, we would ask for the formal vote. Even my 10th grader would have gotten it.
All right, is there a motion on the setbacks?
Is there any reason why we're bifurcating it now?
Yes.
Because he,
okay.
Yes,
he wants to vote
I
in
would-
favor.
Yes, I would like,
He's not gonna be able to vote on the resolution no matter
Right.
what, because it's only gonna be one resolution, but
right. Is there a motion on the setback variances?
Move approval of setback variances.
Second,
Mary McNabb,
yes.
Frank Leiter.
Yes.
Steve Tober.
Yes.
Wolfgang Torres.
Yes.
Kevin Wenzel.
Yes.
Joseph Steinberg.
Yes. Is there a motion on the building coverage variance?
Move approval, building coverage variance.
Second.
Mary McNabb,
Yes.
Frank Leiter.
Yes.
Steve Tober.
Yes.
Wolfgang Torres.
Yes.
Kevin Wenzel.
Yes.
Joseph Steinberg.
No.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Greg, are you supposed to be,
because when they
She's
never
here.
have
I'll,
this
let me just, okay,
architect-
hold on a second.
Well, no, they don't- I mean, he's just letting you know
Here
that
she
there
is.
is a deep
Craig,
difference
he's here.
between
he went that way to get you.
calculation and the architect, so we just wanted you to be aware of that. They don't have to submit revised plans for that. Because it really didn't impact on the variance.
Jessica, can you get Stephanie? Oh. Steph? Steph.
Rich?
Yep. Is that your phone?
See you, Rob. Rob. Nash is closed on that house, right?
Correct.
Because we got that email today.
know, I have to have the same response
The kid has.
I would like to share with you, if you don't mind, I left, believe it or not, there were so many papers in Vogel that I left all my other ones at home.
Oh, so you wanna share it?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah,
So this,
absolutely.
I announced at the beginning that we're going out of order.
Oh, we are, okay, so what's next?
We're gonna take, we're gonna do Feldman next.
Feldman, okay. That's right there.
And the rest of my,
We're going to the tennis courts.
all right, the Feldman case is next.
I need everybody. Can we line them up and just swear everybody in? I would like Jake, Allison, Lynn, please, come on up.
That's, you know, I know what they mean.
Yeah.
You know, we heard it last time.
I'm not going anywhere. Elaine, it's on the record that I'm here now.
Let's swear everyone in.
Just to put on the record that I'm here.
Yes.
Yes.
The record should reflect that the vice chairman arrived.
I
do.
Timothy Klessy.
Jake Feldman.
Allison Canfield. You want me to spell it?
Wait, Allison,
Canfield.
Canfield.
Canfield. One L, A-L-I.
A-L-I.
Yes.
Lynn Ranieri, L-Y-N-N-E, last name R-A-N-I-E-R-I.
Rich Keller, K-E-L-L-E-R.
Maybe I'll start, because I'll do the introductions.
At the microphone.
I'm Timothy Klessy, I'm a licensed architect in the state of New Jersey and in New York. Appeared in front of this board on numerous occasions and also was the architect of record that designed the house that we're talking about tonight, and appeared in front of the Historic Commission with reference to that project. Rich Keller is here also, who's the planner that did the site plan work on the house. Jake Feldman is the owner of the property. Allison is the chairman of the Historic Preservation Commission. She's who we presented to for that hearing. And Lynn Ranieri is the, I guess I'm going to call her the president of the but she's not the president. But she's the curator.
Let's say longtime member.
Yes, the longtime member of the Millburn Short Hills Historic Society, and really is the one that runs the place if you ever go over there. She controls the whole show. Well, you do, kind of. You really do. So I went in front of the Historic Commission with this house at 153 Highland back in June, July, August, and June, July, August, and September of 2018, and received approval to build the new home. And there's also an accessory building in the rear of the property. And I think you've been through, I guess I have to start from the beginning, but Rich was in.
I think everyone on this board is
And
familiar
the
with
board-
that
Familiar with the
board-
property,
The
okay.
board
We voted on that.
voted on that application.
And we came in initially, just so everyone knows, to the Historic Commission with a couple of ideas on what to do on this site. The site was being sold by the neighbor who's immediately to the right, the neighbor to the north. And we had one idea of actually removing the existing house in the back, and then had another idea of retaining the original part of the building, which was the carriage house to the house on the right, removing the newer structures and converting it back into a carriage house on our property, and then adding our new building in the foreground. In addition to that, we're proposing a tennis court and a pool and a patio and, a series of site developments. And we went back and forth with the Historic Commission a couple of times, and we had a front yard average setback of, I think, 64.21 feet on that site, although the house immediately to the right is, I think, at about 138 or something off of the property, which is really, the house to the right is a historic house, which was the house that we are kind of the most sort of violating, or the most we'd be worried about from a historic perspective. So we ended up going back and forth on a lot of items with the Historic Commission, but also ended up trying to go back and forth with the setback of the building, and ended up somewhere around 130 feet. When I look back through my notes, I see I presented first at 100, then I presented at 125, then I presented at 30, which when we went back added the portico became at 128.69, which is actually where our building is proposed to sit today. And I guess I have to say that we didn't realize at the time that we were triggering a couple of problems with the site when we did it. We didn't realize that when we turned the present home, which was a previous accessory building, back into an accessory building, that we were going to run a violation of the building height of that accessory building. And us and the Historic Commission and I think the town, which I guess, or I don't know, I guess I would say the town, all feel that the preservation of that building is an important element to us. And that's why Rich came in last month or 2 months ago and presented the variance for that height. And we also triggered a variance with this for this rear yard unoccupied, maximum accessory use coverage, right? And we didn't actually realize it at the time. But if we could pull the building up forward, we would eliminate that requirement. But since we really are deeming for the character of the street and the character of the historic district that we want the building back, we've triggered this sort of variance. It's allowed to be 20% of the rear yard area. The rear yard area is about 40,725 square feet. 20% would be about 8,145 square feet. The variance that we're seeking is to allow us to be at 27.81 square feet, which is percent, which is a coverage of that rear yard of 11,325 square feet. And the deviation is at 7.81% or 3,180 square feet. The tennis court itself is 7,200 square feet. So the tennis court, you'd have to have a tennis court. I guess it's half of a tennis court to be able to do this. So that's why we're here. We're actually seeking a request to put in the tennis court. I just want you to know that lot coverage is under, right? Lot coverage is at 28.76%. We're allowed to be at 35%. Rear yard unoccupied is actually under. Rear yard unoccupied is at 36.5%, where it's allowed to be at 25%. Our lot area itself is, I'm going to say, enormous, not undersized. It's 78.978%, okay, or feet, and it's only required to be 29,000, but it's at 78,978. So I guess I'll let Allison go first, or Jake, would you like to go? Do you have anything to add after this? I guess I'll run right down the line if anyone has anything to add, but we think it's a better planning alternative to allow us to push the house back so that we can better maintain the character of the historic district. I think it's really that simple. And I understand the problems that we've created by doing this, and that it is a new home and it could be sited forward. But we think actually, we got everybody to come out because we think really for the benefit of the town, it's a smarter decision to allow the variance to proceed. So I guess with that, are there any questions for me or at this point, or?
Did you look at how far you'd have to push it forward to eliminate the need for a variance?
I think Rich knows that better than me.
You're right, it's not your time yet.
Okay, so can we come back to
Yeah,
him?
that's fine.
Yes.
Okay, I'd like to, do you have anything to?
Sure.
Are all these witnesses sworn?
Yes.
Okay.
The only thing I would say is prior to our withdrawal last time around, we were not equipped to convince this board that the setback of the house was not something that we did based on our simple choosing, that this was something that was worked through with historic preservation. We took a holistic view of the site to maintain the character of the neighborhood. This was a significant aspect of the approval from historic preservation to receive the certificate of appropriateness. Chairperson Canfield and historian Lynn were kind enough to come and provide and represent, Chairperson Canfield was representing the HPC in the hopes of convincing this board that we were not fibbing when we claimed that the HPC did in fact encourage us to set the house back despite the fact that it was not part of the resolution. So we're very appreciative of that, and we hope we'll be able to convince this board that our request is reasonable and appropriate.
Any questions of this witness from anyone in the audience? Any questions of the last witness from anyone in the audience? Next witness.
Again,
Before the witness, can I ask a question of the chair?
Yes, absolutely.
Just recollect, wasn't the issue that you had with this that the pool house was potentially another house?
Yes, but
That already has been resolved.
That's been resolved.
We in April adopted the resolution memorializing the approval of the building height
Of the
for
height
the pool
variance.
house.
Okay, very good, thank you. All right.
So the only real variance before the board is accessory coverage to permit the tennis court
Okay,
to be installed.
thank you.
And maybe I can shed a little light on that too. Thank you again for the courtesy this evening, Mr. Chair. We appreciate that. What I'm basing this on, and what we based this on as a commission, was Article 8, and specifically 803.2, which what our responsibilities and duties are to this community from a historic standpoint. This particular property was divided. It was the original Stuart Hartshorn property, Stuart Hartshorn III. And this was an accessory building off of that particular structure. Even though it was a secondary structure to that lot, it became, when the lot was divided, it became, again, it will become again another secondary structure. As a historic commission, we decided that it was important to keep that structure because it told a story, the history of that particular property. So we asked Jake Feldman if there was any way possible if we could reuse that. And under our ordinance, it's basically that we encourage an appropriate reuse of a structure or that particular site. And we can prove that that was a secondary structure to that particular lot. So, first of all, I think what's important too is I think we need to apologize from an HPC to this commission because we should have drafted in a recommendation of this particular lot when we asked them to move the house back. It was more harmonious with the actual structure when it became a pool house. So we didn't, again, that kind of left us. It was over a period from June of 2018 to just now standing in front of you today. So 11 months, after the fact. So we should have had that drawn up and let you know that if there were any conflicts with possible, zoning regulations. So we apologize for that. Again, I'm looking at safeguard of the heritage, which I think you guys know, encourage the appropriate use and reuse of structures, site, develop in an appropriate and harmonious setting, which I think that's what we asked them to do. Prevent new construction in keeping with the character of the historic district. Mr. Feldman, Tim, we had over 14 recommendations for them, and they certainly adhered to that, and they did follow those recommendations that we did give to them. Also, my job was in assisting the property owner to keep with the requirements and standards of this particular article, Article 8, Historic Preservation. I think it was really important to pull this house back. I think it was a very modest and humble thing. It really displays the hartshorn house. If going down Highland, it would have been in the way of the actual hartshorn house. So working with this team, they worked with us and pushed it back, made it smaller. I think, again, there were all kinds of different variations. But as far as keeping the structure, I think originally possibly they thought maybe they could take down the structure. I'm not really sure, but we convinced them to use it as some other building on site, and one of those was a pool house. So we were very grateful for that. I'd also like to say the patience to presenting this application, the Feldmans, your patience, and also the learning curve throughout this whole process of understanding the importance of the historic site and the district. And I think whether he wanted it or not, he got a huge history lesson. So we appreciate that.
I want to interrupt you just for a moment.
Sure.
To say that, to give you a little background. When this matter came before the zoning board originally, there were two variances that were sought. One of them was the height of the building way in the back. And we heard the whole story about how that building, the newer portions are going to be stripped away, the original building is going to be left, etc. And by a vote of this zoning board, that variance height, which is all that was before us, was granted, height variance on that old building. That's ancient history. The issue then was the issue that's before the board tonight, and that's a variance for accessory use coverage. And that was, they began to present that matter to the board, and the issue that came up was their argument, and the argument I assume is tonight as well, is that because the house, the new house, is pushed back so far, it squeezes the backyard and causes them to need a variance in order to put in the tennis court. And they presented a resolution of the Historical Society, the Historical Commission. Historic Commission. Having sat on that commission for quite a while, I should know the name by now.
It's been a while.
And when we looked at the resolution, there was no mention of the fact that the new house is pushed back 128 or 130 feet. And there were members of this board who opined that if this was that important to the Historical Preservation Commission, why wasn't it in this long resolution? And at that point, the applicant asked for an adjournment, withdrew that application that they seek tonight, which is, as I'll say it again, which is required because that the house, the new house, is pushed so so far back from the street. So the problem that we're facing as a board is if this was so important to the Historic Preservation Commission, why wasn't it in the resolution that the commission adopted?
Right.
That's basically, I think, why you're here tonight.
I think so. And again, as I was reading through all of this and, looking at our responsibilities and duties, and I think I, again, offer our apologies that was not put in. This application took, like I said, over a period of, they stood in front of us 4 times. We had a changing of chair, which should not be an excuse. Somewhere along the line, it just fell off the radar. I think, though, also what's important with these historic properties and these historic lots is a lot of them are non-conforming. So once they're split, it even makes them more difficult to save and preserve the history of that lot and then try to work around modern conveniences or request of the homeowner. The Feldmans came in front of us always with a tennis court on that application. And we forced them, basically didn't force them, we encouraged them to push that house back so the Hartshorn house could be more of the scene house on that particular street. So again, 14 recommendations, they followed over 14 recommendations. They followed all the recommendations. The size of the house, I believe the square footage went down. They pushed the house back. Very humble application over this period of time, and they understood what we were trying to do from a historic standpoint. As far as the tennis court, I can't speak to that, but from a historic piece, I think that's exactly where we would like it to be, in the far corner, away so no one can see it. So that's, any questions from?
Other questions from board members of this witness?
I have a question.
Yes, Mary.
Is it possible to file an amended resolution? I don't know if that might be.
I mean, the HPC amended resolution. I don't know the answer to that. That's a question for
I think
the
it's
HPC's attorney, who happens to be the township attorney.
I know that. I think it's extremely important that be set back. And if that piece is missing, and that is something that is a problem for the chairman, maybe that is a way to resolve the issue.
Maybe.
Well, we have the testimony right now to resolve the issue, no?
Yeah, I mean, that's what they're here for tonight, to resolve that issue. And I think the issue is, was it important for the Historic Preservation Commission to have the house moved back 128.5, whatever it is, feet from the front property line? That's the issue.
Well, certainly it was harmonious to the structure that we were asking them to keep. So by pulling the house up further, the distance between the pool and the carriage house, or the pool house, that it becomes quite distant. But I think, go ahead, would you like to speak on that? I mean, that's the way we looked at it.
Wait,
from
before you, I want to ask one question, because while you were talking, you said part of the concept of pushing it back was so that it would not obstruct the view of the adjacent Hartshorn house.
Correct.
So I guess, for somebody to consider is, how far back did they have to push it to take it out of the view of the Hartshorn house? That's one thing. That's one thing. Let me finish my question. And then, I know you've mentioned now a couple of times that there were 14 recommendations that were made that they've adhered to, and I assume those recommendations are in the report of Barton Ross.
Yes.
Because they're not incorporated in the resolution. I don't see 14 recommendations, so I assume those 14 recommendations were included in his report.
They were, and I say over 14 because certainly every board member had a recommendation also. So the Feldmans have heard more than their share of recommendations in the size, the massing, all of that of the house, from the original plan that they gave to the Historic Commission. I also think it's very important in having Lynn get up and speak too is the history and what that street and what we're trying to follow, and that is that many of the houses were set back. Unlike in the 1940s, as you saw the two pillar houses on the side of each, this Hartshorn house and the Feldman proposed house, is they were very up close from the 1940s. But that really wasn't the streetscape of that particular district or community. And Historic has tried to maintain that moving forward to keep those houses set back. And I think Lynn could shed some more light on the history of that particular district with that history.
Are there any questions of this witness from board members? Any questions from the audience of this witness? Next witness.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm not speaking here on behalf of the Historical Society. I'm speaking on behalf of my 25 years of research into local history and my prior 15-year service on the Historic Preservation Commission. The Short Hills Park area is in the National Register of Historic Places and in the New Jersey Register of Historic Places. And one of the obligations and goals of the National Register of Historic Places is to coordinate, identify, and protect historic sites in the United States. And the New Jersey Register of Historic Places follows the same goal. And just to give you a quick little, that's right, thank you, history of the area, it was developed by Stuart Hartshorn over and over and over again throughout the literature about the historic Short Hills Park area, which is what he called it. He emphasizes that he wanted a park-like atmosphere. In the 1884 American Architect and Building News, and don't shoot the messenger, they wrote, "If you would like to see the original and only garden wherein Mother Eve and Father Adam built their home and commenced housekeeping, come with me for an afternoon on a trip into the country adjacent to New York and about an hour from our city." And that was the Short Hills Park district he was referring to. Throughout the rest of that article, they describe driving through the district and looking at the homes there. And another important point he made is passing Montview. If you go up Highland, that's the house opposite Wells Lane, the big blue house with the wraparound porch. He notes that it has a superb little park in front. The lower end of Highland Avenue has smaller, newer homes and smaller front yards. But as you go up Highland, close to where Mr. Feldman's property is, it's sweeping front lawns that preserve that park-like atmosphere. There was an undated biography about Stuart Hartshorn wrote, "There was no rude clearing of the land. The noblest trees were left about the sites. It has the appearance of a great park." Mr. Hartshorn was sensitive to this site and the Short Hills area when he bought the land. He created curving roads to follow the contours of the hills, and he sited his historic homes on little rises to give this prominence so that when people came to see his area and saw the homes, they would be sitting up in these little rises with the great sweeping front lawns. He wrote, "In this region, nature's plotting offers escape from monotonous regimentation of home development. Parks and reservations frame this locality." I have here an 1874 picture of Highland Avenue. It can't go into evidence because it belongs to the Historical Society. And I just want to show you what it looked like. It did have more of a park-like atmosphere with few trees, actually, and the great sweeping front lawns on this upper end of Highland Avenue. That's my notes. Here they are. Just to wind up, I would like to end with a request that you grant the variance because the proposed use or development is inherently beneficial to the Short Hills Park Historic District and I think goes to great lengths to preserve the character of the historic district. And I agree with Allison that the tennis court is not a feature we want in the front yard, and I think it's very appropriately cited as it is. Thank you very much.
Any questions of this witness? Anyone in the audience have any questions of this witness? Mr. Keller, are you next?
Did you have a question for me, Richard?
No,
Oh, he held up his hand and I didn't know what that
because he
was.
didn't want you to sit down yet, in case anybody had any questions.
Oh, okay.
I'm just waving to you. Rich Keller, licensed professional engineer and planner in the state of New Jersey on behalf of the applicant. Just to go right to a couple of the questions, the average setback as determined by the ordinance and confirmed by the zoning officer for this section of Highland is 64.21 feet. If the proposed house were to be set at 64.21, we would have enough rear yard area to aggregate the tennis court, the pool, the pool house, and the patios around it. So if we complied with the ordinance, the application as presented would comply with the accessory setback.
So you have to move it
You
all
could,
the way up
you
there?
would comply with the 20%.
Oh, yeah, all the way to 64.21, and we would comply with the 20%. I'm going to,
What's the minimum you'd have to move it?
what's that?
What's the
He
minimum?
means 60, he said
Yeah, if it
the
goes-
average, he'd have to comply with the average front yard setback, which would be 64.21.
So we need to move it up approximately 60 feet. So on sheet number 2, that's part of your package, we have a dashed line that's drawn in at the average setback of 64.2 feet.
Yeah.
You can see that the proposed portico is at 128.7, 69, and the closest corner of the actual dwelling is at 131.79. The adjoining home to the north, which is 163, that has a setback of 136.76. So that
Wait,
was
say it again?
136.76.
Mhm.
So that was the Hartshorn home, of which this structure in the back was subordinate to. It was the caretaker cottage. It was set back appropriately, and the request from HBC was that in the placement of a new home, it be set back roughly at that same distance, so that that relationship certainly wouldn't be inversed, where this property became dominant over the Hartshorn home. While it's not necessarily subordinate to, it doesn't block the view, and it maintains the approximate setback that was appropriate back to the 40. So,
I'm sorry, when you say block the view, exactly what does that mean?
well, from it's never going to block the view unless you're further forward, but you create a common streetscape so that if you're on these properties, these buildings start to line up. So you're not actually blocking the view, because obviously, if at some point I get in front of the home, there's not going to be any way that I'm going to block the view of 163 Hartshorn.
Right.
But what was sought was that there at least be not an inversion of that subordinate relationship, where the house not be pulled forward so that it appeared to dominate over the historic home to the north. So the request was to site that roughly at a point of about 130 feet back from the street. As Tim said, there were multiple iterations over 4 months of hearings where that was kind of massaged and placed where it seemed appropriate. Part of that application, and I have, I think, iteration number 3, but there was always a tennis court on there. There was always some, after the first meeting, there's always some reuse of the
If you bring back the sheet in front of this one, and you look at the house above the house you don't want to block, isn't that one blocking the view?
It wasn't in the handout, but maybe what I'll do is I'll do a handout, which is a more detailed view of that.
Do with A1?
Yeah. And I think actually the word block was used, and
It's probably a line.
I picked up, I think it's not to overwhelm it and to align with it was really the more
Right.
correct phrase. Kind of picked up on the verbiage that was before.
Yeah, okay, but
This would be A3.
the house to the north of the one you want to align to, doesn't that not align? Yeah, right.
Well, I think it's significant enough, we can talk to Tim about it. It's significant enough, you look at again, the angle of this road, the red line is the average setback, and if you parallel that, we don't come closer to it. So there's an alignment in a sense that while we're slightly twisted, we're set slightly behind the Hartshorn home to the north at 160.
Okay, so we're in agreement that the Hartshorn home, the house that's to the north of that is in front of that home, right?
It's slightly in front of it.
Which is what you don't want to do with this home.
We didn't want this one to come up to the red line, because then this property, which was originally part of that, told a story that these were once aligned, and there's still a distinct structure, that if we move this forward, like the house to the one on the north of, I think it's 177 Highland, where there was a newer house that was created at 64-foot setback, that,
And to the two houses,
it's two houses to the north at 177 Highland.
and two houses to the south.
Two houses to the south become newer structures, and again, are roughly set at about that average setback. So they wanted to have a relationship between these two properties where the historic relevance of the mother property wasn't overwhelmed by moving a house up to 64 feet. So we were asked, or I wasn't, but Tim was asked and Mr. Feldman was asked if they could keep this house back so that it would not move forward of the original Hartshorn home.
Okay, thank you.
So just to recap, 20%, by the way, when we move that house back to that roughly 128, 130 feet, we lose 15,000 square feet of rear yard area. So, and that's what we have to amortize our accessory use coverage over. The
So
permitted.
what is the rear yard area?
I'm going to give it to you right now. The permitted, the rear yard area is 40,725 square feet, of which we're permitted 20% of that, so it's 8145. The existing, because the house was so far back, was way under. But the proposed, and there were no accessory structures, the proposed, or very minimal, the proposed is at 27.8%, which is 11,325 square feet of coverage. So the extent of the variance is 7.8%, or 3,180 square feet. But again, this is only because the house was pushed so far back and we lost 15,000 square feet in excess of 15,000 square feet of rear yard area. I would point out this, we have other metrics to guard against overdevelopment of accessories in rear yards. One is the rear yard unoccupied. We are conforming to the...
I'm going to interrupt you for a minute. I think we're getting lost here.
Okay.
The issue, as I understand it, was when this matter first came before this zoning board, the argument was made, we need this variance because we were required
Correct.
by Historical Preservation Commission to move our new house back 130 feet.
Correct.
And when it was clear, I guess, to the applicant and to whoever was there that night, you were,
Me.
that you weren't going to be able to show that the Historical Preservation Commission either forced or recommended strongly, or whatever the word is, that the applicant do that.
Mm-hmm.
We're here tonight to hear that issue and that issue only, as I understand it. Whether, because it's clear, and you've made this very clear in your testimony, and so has the architect, that if this house was at 64.2 feet, or whatever that measurement is, the average measurement for the for the front yard setback, you wouldn't be here tonight.
That's correct.
You wouldn't need the variance. My understanding is that you're here tonight, the applicant is here tonight, because his testimony was, or the testimony of his experts, was that they were strongly urged, let's put it that way.
Correct.
By historical preservation, to move the house back 130 feet.
Correct.
Well, that's what we're here to hear.
Okay, and you don't need any C2 testimony?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I mean,
Then I don't need to,
Wait, I want to ask you a question, because you said you lost 15,000 square feet of rear yard.
in excess of, yes.
Oh, over
Yep.
15. Okay, and the only reason I asked you for clarification was because if I added the 15,000 to the 40,725, 20%, a conforming 20% would only allow you to have 11,145, where what you're proposing is 11,325. So it's in excess of 15,000.
It's in excess. I don't have the exact number, but we did size the patio so that it would be compliant if we were set at 64.
Okay.
And certainly when we make the application, if this were to be approved, when we make application, we would demonstrate that to the zoning office.
Did you appear before historical preservation?
I did not.
You did not.
And unfortunately, Tim wasn't here last time, so that's why we withdrew this portion of the application last time.
Mr. Snyder, if I could just clarify.
You have to come to the microphone.
And if I could just clarify, you did ask me a question, and yes, Historic Preservation or Historic Commission truly believes that this is the appropriate spot for this particular building. Also, there was a lot of give and take, and that supporting of the historic structure, and again, that harmony piece in our ordinance. So yes, to answer your question, this is very important.
You strongly advise.
Very important.
Notwithstanding the fact that the formal resolution makes no mention
Right.
of
And
the
my
fact
apologies
that-
again.
You don't have to apologize to this board. Okay.
Can
All
I
right.
ask
Yes.
just a question?
Please.
Hope I don't get in trouble for this. Why isn't the house to the north of the Horshorn house also required to be back? Why was that one, which is a new construction, why was that one allowed to be
The
built?
more contemporary structure, is that the one there? Again, that's a whole different animal, but there was wetlands behind that property. Again, from a historic standpoint, we allowed them to put back a contemporary structure because there was a contemporary structure there. It was built in the late 1940s, I believe. I'll have to look back on my records.
No, this one.
Just a totally different animal. Some of those things that we can't control, but that particular property, if we weren't dealing with wetlands, would have been forced to be pushed back.
Thank you very much, appreciate it.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Are there any other witnesses?
No.
I don't think so. Did anyone in the audience have any questions of any of the witnesses? Anyone in the audience have any comments he or she would like to make with respect to this request for variance for rear yard? No.
Accessory
Accessory
coverage
coverage.
of 27.81%.
Hear none, see none, close the public portion. Anybody have any remaining issues with why this was required?
I don't have any issues, but I know that property, and I've sat on the commission, and I think that it's really important to keep that space for the streetscape and for the historic districts and the houses that are within it.
And my only comment is that I think the unsupported statements that were made 2 months ago before this board have now been supported. And it is clear that the applicant did not wake up one morning and say, I think I'll put that house back 130 feet from the front property line. So is there a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second. Is there a second?
Second.
Yes.
David Yes. Frank Whitner?
Yes.
Steve Tozer?
Yes.
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 Yes. Good luck. Okay, we have two more cases to hear tonight. The first we're going to hear is calendar 3683-19, Alexander and Irina Peckel at 19 Reeves Circle. What is not being heard?
Which one?
The original second one on the application,
Wyoming Avenue.
353, there was a deficiency in the notice.
I do. My name is Hayk Ekshian, Hayk. Last name Ekshian, Ekshian.
Wait, EK,
Shin.
thank you.
I'm the architect for this.
Yes,
project.
we need you to give us some
Is
background.
that your client sitting there?
Yes.
Okay, I just want to make sure he's in the room.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
I am a licensed.
Education and your experience.
I'm a licensed architect in New Jersey. I've been licensed since 2013. I own Space and Mark LLC for 5 years now. I've graduated from New Jersey Institute of Technology in 2008. I've appeared in front of boards in Chatham Borough, Summit, and multiple other boards. This is the first time I'm appearing in front of this board.
Your qualifications as a registered architect are accepted by this board. I want to ask you one question before you begin. And I'm looking at A1 of Space and Mark drawings, and I'm looking at the proposed site plan, which is, I think, the second drawing to the right-hand side. My question is, I just want to be sure I'm reading this correctly. You have a front yard setback request for a variance, and am I correct that it starts out on the right-hand side of the front of the property at no variance required?
Right.
And then goes across the front? What's the deepest part of the variance required?
39 feet. So it's 1 foot variance.
1 foot,
Yes.
1 foot variance at its greatest,
That is.
going
yes.
down to 0. Is
Yes.
that correct?
Yes.
And I want to be sure that I'm reading your 12-foot setback line is for the second story?
Yes. We are proposing to add an attic, and it is for the attic.
And that's the little triangle on the right-hand side?
Yes, it is.
Of the main house?
Yes.
And you have also variances, now is that existing to the rear?
Yes. This whole building is existing. We're proposing to build on top of
On
the
top of
existing.
it, so
yes.
you have, those are your variances?
Yes.
Two
Okay.
variances.
2 variances. Yes.
Okay,
The survey on the right shows the existing configuration of the house,
That's correct.
which is currently a 2-story house.
That's correct.
And the half-story you're adding is basically a dormer.
It is a half story. We tried to make it look like a dormer
Okay.
as much as possible. We're adding a master suite at that level. So that's all the site conditions that we just went over. I want to walk you through house, inside the house. The existing, it has a first.
Let me just stop you
Yes,
for a
go.
minute. Ladies, if you want to sit in these two chairs up here in the front,
Yes.
yeah, you could sit
Take
over
those two
here.
chairs. Come take one of
You
the
could
chairs.
sit right here.
Yes, those are both empty.
My clients came to me with a requirement of adding a master suite in addition to what they currently have. And we looked at different ways of doing this addition, and we found that the best solution was to do a half story over the existing structure. Currently, the house, the first story has a foyer. You enter through a living room, dining room to either side, small kitchen in the back, an existing den, more like a breakfast area, a powder room, and an existing family room. The rooms are modest sized. On the second floor, we have 3 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms. Over the family room, we have some space to possibly do an addition, and over the garage, there's some space to do possibly an addition. However, both these areas are too far apart from each other to create a master suite. On this side, it's not drawn in on the second floor plan, but this chimney extends up. So it's a wood burning chimney which we can't remove. To get to this area, we would have to make a hallway through this bedroom into this room, and it only gives us 200 square feet, which does not give us enough space to create the master suite. Therefore, the most efficient way of doing this addition was to build on top of this structure, the middle part. And we tried to stay from the sides as much as possible. Doing an addition over the garage would have put us over the side yard too much, and over the family room, there's enough room for us to do what we want to do. So we decided to put another set of stairs on top of the existing stairs, which is a very efficient way of using the space, and raising the roof. So at the front end, we're only raising the roof 5 feet, and also at the back. So it's not like a regular story of like 7-8 feet. It's only 5 feet, and slowly increases in height towards the middle. So the stairs will come at this higher ceiling area, and to the left of it we'll have a walk-in closet, and to the right of it we'll have a master bedroom and a small bathroom to the side. We're proposing a skylight for the bathroom, and at the front we're proposing to add 2 egress windows and also 2 windows on the sides, where we're making it look like two small dormers. So that's double. So this is the front elevation of the house. This is the portion that we're adding, this 5 foot of wall, and we're bringing a decorative roof down to make it look more like a dormer, and break up the height of the structure, make it look more like a 2.5 story house at that section. We're going to match the siding to the existing siding, or it's going to be a uniform look. These are the 2 side elevations, and this is the rear elevation where we just we left it flat, just increased the wall height. Other than that, so because of that, we are as we went over before, we're only encroaching into the front setback only 1 foot at the maximum, and at the side, we're only encroaching into the side yard 2.29 feet at the maximum, and it also tapers off to 0 before we get to the middle of the house. So they're very minor variances that we're requesting. We'll hope that you'll grant that to us. So with that, I'll take your questions.
I just have one question for you. Tell me again, I'm looking at this 12-foot side yard setback line at the front of the house. What's the greatest amount of setback? Right there.
The deviation, the
The
greatest.
deviation,
2.29, I believe.
2.29 feet.
Yes.
Right, because it's gonna have a setback of 9.71 feet,
Yeah.
as it's shown on the plan.
And 9.71.
Right.
And any other questions from board members?
When you went back to the elevation, the peak of the roof, how much above the existing roof line is that? Is it the same 5 feet?
We're estimating the current peak of the roof to be at 30 feet. So we're estimating that we're only going to increase it by 2 feet to 32 feet, which is the maximum allowed by the zoning ordinance.
Okay.
And you don't need a variance there.
No.
So you're just changing the pitch?
Yes.
Simple.
So you're basically talking about 2 variances.
Yes.
And the 2 variances are basically just extending the front setback and the side setback up
yes.
to this new half-story.
Yes.
Both of those conditions, front setback and side setback, are pre-existing non-conforming conditions for the
That's-
existing dwelling.
That's correct.
Any other questions of this witness from board members? Anyone in the audience have any questions of the witness? Just questions now. Come to the microphone, please. Give your name and address.
No comments?
You'll get the opportunity for that later.
Okay. I'm Bonnie Wofsy, 20, W-O-F like Frank, S like Sam, Y, 21 Reeves Circle in Millburn.
And your property is where?
Right
in
next door.
relation-
Right next door, facing the house, it's to the right,
Property to the right, okay.
closer to the garage.
Go ahead.
My question to you, you said that, where are you? Okay. You said that it starts at 5 feet in the front and 5 feet in the back. How much taller does the middle of this roof go?
About 2 feet. It's going to be about
So a
2
total
feet.
of 7 feet higher than what is already there?
No, only 2.
How's that? If you're not,
Because the
Come to the microphone.
The existing house is about 30 feet at the peak,
yeah,
and we're not raising it that like up. We're flaring out the roof, so the pitch of the roof is lessening and opening up, so we can get more space under that roof. We're only raising the peak about 2 feet.
And I just want to make it clear to you, they're not asking for a height variance.
okay.
So what they're doing is within the building code
I
on
understand.
height.
But my question is, and the only way I can actually ask the question is I have a picture of the house, and I'm just curious as to how much higher it's going to be. Do you see what I'm saying?
Mhm.
Right here. Is it gonna be up to this antenna?
I don't believe so. No.
You don't believe so, or you don't?
No,
Or
it's
no?
not. I mean, it's a picture. I can't take measurements off it.
Oh, okay, because this is the house over here, here's my house over here, and if you're going to even put 5 feet up here, you're gonna be past the chimney, am I correct?
No, your house seems taller than our house.
No, that's your house.
Oh, this is our house. Okay.
Yes.
No, we're not going that high.
Well, how high are you going?
Wait.
So it's gonna be past where the chimney is now. Your roof is going to be past where your chimney is now.
I possibly. I'm not. I can't tell from this picture.
But I'm going to interrupt now and cut off this questioning because
Okay.
they're not asking for a height variance, and they will not get a building permit from the town if they go beyond the allowable height in the district.
And we'll have a chance to make a comment.
Well, if they go too high, they'll have to come back to this board.
No, you're gonna get an opportunity to make a statement. That's
Yes,
correct.
you'll-
Thank you. No, I'm glad
That's-
to hear so far. I'm glad to hear.
Okay. Any other questions of this witness? Apparently, he's the only witness? That,
I might want to make a closing statement. But
well, if you
Well,
want
then
to,
you
you're
have to
gonna
be
have to
sworn
come
in.
now.
Sure.
No, he's not gonna make a closing statement now, because you're gonna accept statements from the neighbors first.
Right.
He
Oh,
closes
okay,
after.
yeah, that's true, if it's a closing statement.
If I can leave that option open, I
Yes, yes.
appreciate it. Thank you.
Is there anyone in the audience who has a comment he or she would like to make? And I'm gonna ask you to restrict your comments to what they're asking for.
Okay.
Which is a,
It's not about
that,
running short.
okay, fine.
I promise. Sworn in. All right. Yes, I do.
Name again and your address for the record.
Bonnie Wofsy, Wofsy, 21 Reeves Circle in Millburn. Okay, just want to say, I know the Peckles, I like the Peckles, they lived in this home before, they moved to Short Hills, now they're moving back. It's been a rental property for many years. My only concern here is, and we've had several renovations on the street. I have pictures of everybody's renovations because people have done lovely things. And yes, it just increases the value of my home when people do bigger and better things. Our concern, and Mrs. Rosenthal is here tonight, and so is Alex Moba, we have a lot of people on the street who were concerned, not just by the height itself, it's just that, is it going to change the integrity of our circle? Are we going to have this our lots are only 50 by 100. And so, as some of the lawyers said before, is it going to negatively impact our neighborhood by having such a multi-layered looking home? Is it going to look like a multi-family home, or is it going to look like a single-family home? And that's all we want to know, because we have a cul-de-sac with 14 homes. This will be the tallest, even though they're only adding a half and they're not asking for a height variance, it will be the tallest structure on our street.
Thank you.
Okay.
You have to be sworn.
Ann Rosenthal.
Swear from testimony that's going to be truthful, truth, and the truth. Now your name and your address.
Ann Rosenthal, 25 Reeve. I've only been there almost 60 years, and I knew Mr. Reeve and feel like I've seen the development of that circle, and it's a very charming little street. We all are very, very interested in our neighbors and want to maintain the integrity of that small community. But when I saw the rendition of this structure, it is not in keeping with the homes that were there originally when it was originally developed. Mr. Reeve had a chicken farm there for many years, Princetonian gentleman farmer, and I knew him very well. During the war years, he had V for Victory on his front lawn. All his vegetables were shaped in a big V. So it goes back a long time, and I've been in Millburn my whole life. So I feel very protective about Reeve Circle. And I would love to see the visual in keeping with what we have. I only wish you should all take a little ride around Reeve Circle one day.
You can assume that everyone
They
sitting
have.
up here has done that.
You know what it looks like, yes. And we'd like to maintain that. We've put our lifetime in that home, so in my home anyway. And I would like to maintain the integrity of Reeve Circle. Thank you for having this.
Thank you. You want to make a closing statement? Anyone else have a statement to make?
You should come up here.
Yeah. Name and address.
Hey, my name's Alex Moba, 17 Reeve Circle.
Wait, say your last name again?
Moba, M-O-A-B-A.
And you're at 17.
That's right. Yeah. So next door neighbors on the other side.
I guess my question to the architect, and I'm not an architect, but was there any thought given to perhaps, you spoke a lot about the functionality and efficiency of the plans. Was there any thought to making it perhaps more aesthetically pleasing as well?
Yes, we had different options. We're trying to keep the existing house look like as much of what it currently looks like. Currently the house, the roof is an eave in the front, and on the left side, this is existing with 2 dormers. So with this, we're trying to match the dormers on the left side, and 2.5-story structure is conforming with many residential neighborhoods. We're not building a 3-story structure, and we're trying to break up the facade at the front by making the roof come down and having the half-story seem like a dormer to an attic space.
Thank you.
How far down does the roof come now relative to what you're proposing?
It is about, this roof is about where it is currently.
That's what I thought, okay.
Yeah.
Anyone else have any comments? Sir, you want to make a closing statement?
Just a quick closing statement. Yes. Alexander Peckel. Members of the board, dear Millburn community, thank you for the opportunity to speak here tonight. My name is Alexander Peckel. My family and I have been proud members of the Millburn community for the past 17 years. We moved to this town in 2002, looking to start a family in the best possible setting we could provide for our children. Both our daughters, Jessie and Amy, Amy's here tonight, Jessie couldn't come, were born and raised in Millburn. They attend the local public schools, and they're really good students. My wife, Irina, and I are incredibly proud parents. Almost 2 decades ago, we did a lot of research that pointed us to Millburn, and it's a great community with incredibly strong academic history that really appealed to us. Our daughters are working incredibly hard to get excellent grades. They aspire to be admitted to top schools in order to pursue their undergraduate studies. I'm very confident that our girls will represent Millburn well and make our community proud. We feel very blessed to be part of this vibrant community we call our home. It was 17 years ago that we bought the 19 Reef Circle house in the Wyoming section of town, and that's the property in question today. For my wife Irina and I, this was our first house, the first house either one of us lived in. We always lived in apartments before that, and we bought the house thinking that it's going to be our forever home. We have very fond memories of the house. Both our girls were born in the house. That's where they took their very first steps, where they lost their first tooth. We love the neighborhood, the great friendship and camaraderie that Ann spoke about. Among the neighbors, our kids learned to bike in the circle. They played hide and seek. So we also have roots in the street. In 2010, there was an opportunity to buy a house in Short Hills, and we took it. We bought a house in Short Hills and we moved. But the plan was always to come back to Reef Circle. At the time we bought the house, it just seemed far away in the future that we were going to move back, but the day is here. Our current plan is to sell the Short Hills house, and move back to Reef Circle. There are many reasons that influenced our decision. Among them, may seem familiar to some of you on the board. We feel that my wife and I are part of what's called the sandwich generation. We have teenage kids on the one side. They want to be independent, self-reliant, but they still require our help, support, and guidance. On the other hand, we have aging parents some of which require more help than others. For instance, Irina's father is going to be turning 83. He's been ill over the last couple of years. He's come and stayed with us over extended period of times over the last couple of years to convalesce. And we believe that for someone like him, the Wyoming section where he can take a walk on the sidewalk and not actually on the road is probably a safer place to be. For our kids, moving back to Millburn represents, giving them the opportunity to have more independence, have the option of walking to town, to walk to friends' homes or to the train station. For Irina and I, it's the realization that sooner or later we'll need to downsize and be prepared to become empty nesters. Our request here today is to convert an existing attic into a usable, livable space. We studied other options and came to the conclusion that this is an optimal, cost-effective way to add that little bit of space that we need for the next number of years, while at the same time helping us to free up some funds to help finance our kids' education. On behalf of our family, I humbly request that you consider granting us the variance that will enable us to proceed with the plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, anyone else in the audience have a statement? Close the public portion of the meeting. Members, anyone want to start off? If not, is there a motion?
Maybe we should open the discussion.
Yeah,
Okay.
start.
Or do you want me to start? I hear what the neighbors are saying, and I always hesitate on an application like this because I do think that it's easy to just say, we'll grant the motion, and especially with a neighborhood like Reef Circle, you want to make sure that that we're not going to make a decision that we're going to regret. That being said, the applicants are not asking for more floor area ratio or anything like that. It's a front yard setback, side yard setback, and it's for pre-existing non-conforming, I guess, conditions. So I'm mixed. I'm curious to see what other people say, but I'm right now leaning in favor of it.
I think it's a thoughtful design. I like the concept of getting the new half floor to match the two dormers that exist on the second floor. That seems like a nice sort of continuity in the design of the house overall. And there's also, and I know we address this regularly, it's trying to bring a house up to today's living standard with a master bath. Although I question a master bedroom on the third floor, but that's just that's not in question here. So I would be in support of the application.
All right, I'll go next. If we have a rule here that we don't use the words de minimis. So I'm not going to use those words. But we have two requests here. One is for a front yard setback variance that starts at 0 and goes to a maximum of 1 foot. The side yard setback variance starts at 0 in the back, halfway down the side of the house, and goes to a maximum of 2.5 feet, something like that. If we say no, I know what's going to happen. The architect will pull the house in a foot in the front and 2 feet on the side and build it anyway. So this is a truly minimal variance request, maybe the most minimum that we've had in the last year or two. I would vote yes.
I'm just gonna say that I'm not happy with the height, but that's not before us. I wish that could be modified a little bit. When I looked at the house today, it was very much like my little neighborhood with two-story homes. And it's a very contained little area. So I know that's not before us, but I felt like I needed to say that.
I agree with Mary, actually. I mean, my thought when I saw it a couple of days ago was, I know that it's all within, I know it's, the height issue is not before us, but looking at the drawing, looking at the design, looking at the house, I thought, gee, that's, I know it's within code, but it's kind of big. Especially with, you compared to the houses around us. Again, I just wanted to make sure I said something.
Is there a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Gary McNabb,
Yes.
Mike Leitner,
Yes.
Steve Silver,
Yes?
Wolfgang Jaffur,
Yes.
Adam Wenzel,
Yes.
Jessica Glad.
Yes.
Joseph Steinberg.
Yes. Good luck with the project.
Thank you.
Last case now.
Good luck, guys.
Thank you.
Make sure they don't make too much noise when they're banging.
This is calendar 3685-19. 84 Myrtle Avenue.
I do. Judson Lalonde. Lalonde.
Daniel Dubenet. Qualifications? Qualifications or?
Qualifications.
Okay, licensed architect, 2001, master's degree from New Jersey Institute of Technology, 1995. My license is current and in good standing, and I practice primarily residential architecture in this municipality and other surrounding ones. I've appeared before this board before.
Many times.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
The short story, this is
Your qualifications are...
Oh, sorry. Thank you. Short story, we have a house in the R6 zone on Myrtle Avenue. It's early 1900 construction, side hall colonial, farmhouse style. Relatively small, it's got a 1,300 livable FAR. And we're seeking no FAR. We're actually going to be at 1,500 square feet when the house is done. The need is simple. The need is small. The need is to give the Lalondes an extra bathroom and ensuite. So currently the house is three bedrooms and 1.5 bathrooms. The net result will be 3 bedrooms, 2.5 bathrooms. Currently they share there's 3 bedrooms on the second floor. They share the bathroom with the 2 boys. So the ask is so we can construct a new bedroom, make one of the little ones a little bit smaller and give the Lalondes their own ensuite bath. To do that, we're building on top of an existing den that exists on the front of the house. We'll be building a 12 by 14 addition on top of the existing den. The existing den is existing non-conforming. So we're seeking 1 variance for front yard setback. Existing is 11.92 feet, proposed will be 11.92 feet. Currently, the existing house is at 9.24 feet. If we were to take the building envelope, the legal building envelope, which is 40 feet from the street, the entire house would be in violation. Right. So there are other places for the addition. We looked at putting it in the back of the house. It's a very old home with very old foundations, 1900s. This piece, the little den piece, was built not too long ago. And I truly believe that aesthetically, the addition of this architecture will enhance the home and the curb appeal. We did 2 things. We created a hip roof so as to be sensitive to the neighbors. It's also a 1.5 feet lower than the existing house, so I think it'll fit very nicely with what's existing. The height of the existing is only 28.5 feet, and the proposed will be 27 feet, so it's not a significantly tall house. And again, it's a pre-existing, non-conforming structure that we'd like to build on top of.
I just want to make sure I understood you correctly. It's currently 3 bedrooms, 1.5 bath.
Yes.
And it's going to be 3 bedroom, 2.5 bath if the variance is approved.
Yes.
Okay.
And just to be clear, you're asking for one variance,
One variance,
which is the front yard setback.
yes.
Can you tell us what the houses to the left and the right, what their orientation is with respect to their front yard
Yes.
setback?
The house to the right, which is the most affected as a result of this addition, they're 20 feet away. They are set back a few feet behind the Lalondes, but because there's a 20-foot 20-foot setback from the in between the two sides. Sorry, there's going to be a maintaining of a light and airspace, and we've instead of adding another gable, which would send the elevation pretty tall, we bent the roof line back to create a hip. So my testimony is that there'd be no detriment to the adjacent neighbor, even though they're a little farther back. 2 doors down, there's another historic old home that's forward about 9 feet from the street. I find that the older homes are all within 9-10 feet of the setback, and some of the newer homes, like the one to the left, which is a ranch style, is set back a bit. But the older fabric of the street are at 9-10 feet from the property line.
So wait, the house to the left has a greater setback?
Greater setback. But again, we studied the solar, the way the sun moves around, and this addition would not cast a shadow to the adjacent neighbor to the right. So no trees will come down. There'll be we'll preserve the light and air and open space. We won't negatively affect the neighbors, and I think it'll be certainly a positive to the lawns, and I think to the neighborhood.
Let the record show that there's no one in the audience, so I'm not going to ask if there's anyone who has any questions or comments. Anyone on the board have any comments about this case?
I'll just say really fast, I think that this is a very modest addition that's being proposed, and I think it will make this house more livable for a family. So I could support the application.
Anyone else have a comment? Is there a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Mary Beth?
Yes.
Steve Hilder?
Yes.
Okay, Florence?
Yes.
Dale Wenzel?
Yes.
Jessica Glad?
Yes.
Josie Steinberg?
Yes.
And his kids lost a tooth there too. Sorry. His kids lost their teeth there too. Thanks.
Oh, Danny.
Good touch.
Is there anyone in the audience who has any matter to come before the board that is not on the agenda?
I just want to tell the board that I hand-delivered to Ms. Davitt tonight a hard copy of the brief in opposition to the petition for certification on the Weingrad versus Miller matter. So Eileen has a hard copy. Eileen, did I email it to you as well? I thought I did. I think I
you did.
emailed it to you. So if anybody is interested in like asking to see the hard copy or to have her email the PDF version, I'm sure you can do that. I just want you to know that I had a conversation with Rob Simon about this particular application, and although I appeared in the appellate division, I did basically a Me Too letter, signing on to his brief. So when it came to the petition in opposition to certification, the opposition to petition for certification, I didn't feel it was appropriate for me to file anything. But what I did do at Mr. Simon's request is I sent him a memo with my comments on issues that I thought he should try and focus on, and I reviewed and provided some comments on his brief.
I'm
just
gonna
so that
ask,
we
I'm gonna ask you,
participated.
since there are some people here who are not attorneys, to explain to the board what a petition for certification means.
A petition for certification is when you have a decision from the appellate division, and it's a per curiam decision, everybody agreed, all three judges voted, were in alignment on this vote.
In favor of the
in
board's
favor of the
decision.
board's decision. You don't automatically get the right to appeal to the Supreme Court in New Jersey. You have to file a petition with the Supreme Court, and you have to explain to them that there are legal issues that are of public importance or novel issues that the court should address because they have, or present general interest subjects that the public would benefit from, and there's a standard of review. And so you have to make that request, and the court has to, vote on it, whether they're going to even allow you to file the appeal. And obviously, the Millers are opposing that. The arguments that they're making are the same arguments that they made at the Law Division in both applications, and before the Appellate Division in both applications. And in fact, the Appellate Division thought so little of many of their arguments that in the opinion of the Appellate Division said, we're not even going to address the rest of the issues because they're not worthy of merit. And despite that, they're filing a petition for certification. I'm sure it's just in an effort to drag this out so that the Millers will lose interest in continuing to spend time and money on this application.
When did that first come before us?
In 2013.
2013.
And
How many of you were on the board then?
yeah.
Were you on the board?
Yeah, I heard
Yeah.
this, I was in
Right,
this
so-
case.
Yeah.
So the case was heard in 2013. The resolution was approved in 2014. That's when they found out sometime after that, when they were doing their title work and getting, ready to close on the property, they found out there was this 313 square foot discrepancy in the front of the property, and the lot was 313 square feet smaller than originally indicated in the application. And they filed an application to amend their relief to allow them to shrink the house a little bit so they could stay within the parameters of their variance relief. Unfortunately, the plaintiff took the position that losing 313 square feet made this an entirely new lot, and that we would have had to have heard it anew, every variance all over again. We argued before the Appellate Division and said, it's not a new lot. It was lot 12 then, it was lot 12 in 2016. It was just 313 square feet smaller because of a mistake made by a title company that didn't pick up the fact that all that little triangular area that's in Brookside Drive was conveyed to the town. So, obviously, the Appellate Division agreed. We'll see what happens now. And you can never predict these things. But Eileen has the brief, and if you have any interest, it's
You
short,
have
it's
it.
20 pages long, so it's not like it's a really,
You have
you're
a half an
limited.
hour you want to kill?
Yeah.
Talk to Eileen. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned.